Hello everyone, I am a storyteller. Tonight, as you curl up in your warm blanket, letting your mind slowly drift between dreams and reality, let me tell you a story. Gently, slowly, but full of mystery that makes you shiver. If you find these stories touch your emotions, please like, share with everyone and subscribe to the channel. That is the most precious gift that gives me more motivation to continue telling. Now, close your eyes, relax. Haunting in the silent night. In the strange silence of the office, I was the only person left. My footsteps echoed like the beats of a heart in the dark night, lingering on the cold tile floor, adding to the loneliness I was feeling. The dim fluorescent light on the ceiling flickered, emitting buzzing sounds like an inaudible whisper, making me feel uncomfortable. Every time I walked, I felt like something was watching me from behind. I work for a consulting company, and on nights like this, when everyone else has left, I often have to sit back to get important work done and no one can help me. Projects are unfinished, reports need to be presented before sunrise. At that moment, there was no time to think about what was around, there was only work, and me, alone in the quiet space. At first, I really liked the quiet of the evening, the feeling of quiet allowed me to focus completely on my work. But in recent weeks, something has changed. There was no longer peace, but an eerie, heavy and scary feeling. This silence no longer brings peace, but makes me feel like there is a presence watching me, from hidden corners that I cannot see. Every night, I work alone, and every night it seems like something reminds me that I'm not alone. The large office, where there was only me and the night, suddenly became a scary place. Strange noises began to appear, initially the gentle sounds of doors being opened and closed for unknown reasons. Sometimes, the phone rings late at night, rings only once and then goes silent. I can't explain those sounds, but they always startle me, making me unable to concentrate on work. My old colleagues had long gone home, but I remained, enduring this strange feeling, as if something was waiting for me. One time, when I was walking down the hallway, the light from the fluorescent lights reflected on the glass, I saw someone's silhouette, a faint black shadow flashing in my eyes. My heart stopped beating when I turned around, but the hallway was still completely empty. It was just me, and the silence was so thick I could hear my own breathing. I tried to explain all those strange phenomena. Maybe it's just the lack of sleep, the stress at work making me tired, or maybe it's a combination of the horror movies I've been watching lately. But no, with each passing night, that feeling became stronger. An invisible presence that I cannot touch, cannot clearly see, but always feel. Especially when I pass by the glass walls that separate the offices. Sometimes, I see a dark shadow flicker in my sight, then disappear immediately. Each time, a cold, creepy feeling would invade me, making me unable to leave immediately. And then, on one special night, everything went beyond the limits of tolerance. I walked into the bathroom, where moving lights automatically turned on, reflecting a long row of sinks and large mirrors. As I splashed water on my face, I caught something reflected in the mirror, a faint shadow passing from behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. I tried to reassure myself that it was just an illusion caused by the light, but the feeling of fear rose again, uncontrollable. As I walked out of the bathroom, I stopped in the middle of the hallway. In front of me, a black shadow stood still, as tall as a person, but with a strange posture, unlike anyone else. My heart beat violently, my legs seemed to have no strength to move. Cold sweat broke out, and I could only stand and stare at that black shadow, not knowing what to do. I can't understand what's going on. I should have run away, sought help, but something kept me from moving. There was only that shadow, standing still and cold like an inexplicable presence. After a long, tense second, the shadow suddenly moved, disappearing behind a pillar in the hallway. I don't dare move on, but I can't go back. I can't leave here without knowing what's lurking in the hidden corners of this building. I couldn't leave, couldn't turn back, even though a part of me wanted to run far away from this building, from the deserted hallway where the shadow had just passed. But another part held me back, making me unable to move, unable to escape this strange feeling. The shadow disappeared behind the pillar, but I still felt the cold, the feeling of being watched from somewhere. There was no one, but that presence, it was still here. I stood there in silence, only hearing the sound of my own breathing echoing in the space. A primal fear, vague and indescribable, spread throughout my body. Cold sweat drenched my shirt, even though the temperature in the building had not changed. There's only one thing that's changed: I feel like I'm no longer alone. There is something very close, very close. I couldn't stand there forever, but I also couldn't move on. Finally, I turned my back and walked slowly, with great caution, as if every step might awaken something terrible lurking in the darkness. I tried to quickly return to my desk, where the computer screen was still on, casting a dim light in the room. That was the only thing that helped me feel a little bit safe, even though this couldn't dispel the fear that enveloped me. A feeling of insecurity suddenly arose. I sat down on the chair, put my hands on the keyboard, but couldn't concentrate on my work anymore. The computer screen faded before my eyes, seemingly no longer clear. Everything started to become blurry, as if I was trapped in a haunting dream, one from which I would never wake up. I looked around the room, everything was normal. Empty desks, tall filing cabinets, and silent chairs without movement. I want to call someone, but don't know who to call. The feeling of loneliness is heavier than ever. This building, it's no longer a workplace. It is something else. Something has changed. When I looked up, my eyes accidentally stopped at the large glass panel separating my office from the office area opposite. This has happened so many times: blurry reflections, glimpses of silhouettes that make me think I see something moving behind me. But this time is different. This time, I not only saw my own faint image in the glass, but also another silhouette. A shadow of a person. Standing silently, right behind me. My heart seemed to stop beating. My whole body froze, unable to move. My eyes couldn't leave that image, the figure standing behind me in the reflected glass. It didn't move at all, just stood there, as if looking at me. My breathing seemed to stop, and in that moment, I knew for sure that this was no hallucination. Not my shadow, not the reflection of the light. I don't dare go back. Don't dare move. That ball started to move. No sound, no footsteps. It simply passed by, coming closer to me. My heart was pounding, each beat like a warning. Cold sweat broke out, soaking into my shirt. But I couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at that shadow. It came closer, step by step slowly, as if it was deliberately playing a joke with me. When it got close, I couldn't stand it anymore. Suddenly, I turned around, hoping to find a logical reason for all that was happening. But no. Nobody. Just me and the darkness. At that moment, I understood that I was completely lost in another dimension. This building is no longer an ordinary building. It has become something else, a place where reality and illusion intertwine. Every step I took, every sound I heard was distorted, becoming heavy and difficult to breathe. There is no more quiet. All that remains is the feeling of being watched and stalked. I ran, rushing towards the stairs, trying to get out of this place. But when I entered the hallway, I stopped. There is someone standing at the end of the hallway. That black shadow, still not moving. I looked at it, and this time, I saw it more clearly than ever. It was a person, a tall man, standing straight, as if frozen in space. The only thing is, his face was a black patch, no light, no obvious features. He just stood there, saying nothing. Every hair on my body stood up. I couldn't look any longer. My steps were heavy, I felt like I didn't have the strength to run, but a part of me still tried to move forward. I don't know who it is, or why he's here. I just know that I have to leave here. Any price. I didn't dare look back again, but my eyes still couldn't leave that black shadow, standing motionless at the end of the hallway. It didn't move, didn't make any sound. The silence lasted so long that I could hear my own breathing, each rapid breath resounding in my head, like hammers pounding into my mind. Every step I took in the hallway now felt like an endless struggle with fear rising within me. The feeling of being watched from behind, from the front, is inescapable. I gasped, trying to control myself, but every time I moved, the air around me became thicker and heavier. It felt like an invisible force was pulling me back, not allowing me to continue. My footsteps echoed in the hallway, as if someone was following me. But every time I turned around, there was only empty space and darkness. I stopped again, unable to move on, unable to run, unable to do anything but stand helplessly. And in that quiet moment, I realized something horrifying. The sounds in the building weren't just random noises anymore. Each sound had a strange rhythm, as if they were conveying some message. The creaking doors, the ringing phone, all had the same pattern, as if they were trying to lead me into a trap I couldn't escape. Suddenly, I felt a cold wind blowing through my body. It was a cold wind, not from any window or passage, but from inside the building itself. The wind carried a musty smell, one I had never smelled before, and certainly not the smell of a normal workplace. It feels like I'm being swept into another space, a place that doesn't belong to this world. Just as I was starting to feel exhausted, I heard a whisper. That whisper was gentle and soft like a passing breeze, but carried a strange power that made me unable to resist. I tried to listen, but the whispers were unclear, just a series of vague sounds lurking in space. However, I knew for sure that it wasn't the sound of someone talking near me. It comes from somewhere far away, from the walls, from the crevices of this house. I can't bear it anymore. I turned around, decided to run, to escape this place. But when I looked towards the hallway, the dark figure at the end of the hallway had disappeared. There was only an empty space left, but I didn't feel any relief. That shadow is not human, I know that. No one can stand still and motionless like that. It could be a ghost, an entity from another world, or something worse. Suddenly, my office phone rang, breaking the oppressive silence. I was startled and quickly picked up the phone, but when I put the receiver to my ear, only one sound rang out in the receiver, the sound of breathing. A steady, deep, heavy breath, like someone was standing right next to me. But when I turned around, I still saw only empty walls and dark hallways. My heart was pounding, and I was in a state of chaos. This cannot be a coincidence. Everything in this building, from the strange sounds to the shadowy figures, is all arranged in a way that I cannot explain. They were like pieces of a haunting puzzle that I couldn't unravel. I decided to continue investigating. I walked through the rooms, opening each door one by one. In each room, I found nothing but empty desks, tall filing cabinets, and a cold, oppressive atmosphere. But every time I open the door, I feel like I'm opening a door to another dimension where nothing is real. Finally, I entered a windowless room where there was no light other than the dim glow of a fluorescent lamp. As I closed the door, I heard the lock creak. It was the sound of a door locking tightly, but no one was there to lock it. It felt like I was trapped in this very building, as if it had become something alive, an entity that was overwhelming me. Inside this room, I saw an old wooden table. On it were a pile of papers stacked together, old and forgotten files. I sat down, and as I looked at those papers, I noticed something strange. These reports, these documents, are not the work I do, not any work this company has ever done. Those are old documents about experiments, strange research, and lines full of codes that I cannot understand. There is something very wrong in this building. And I, in utter confusion, began to suspect that I had been dragged into a never-ending nightmare. The feeling of being imprisoned in a windowless room gradually became heavier. The air was thick like an invisible blanket covering my body, making it difficult to breathe. The papers on the table, with their incomprehensible writing, seemed to speak to me, the strange markings on them an invisible reminder that I shouldn't be here. I quickly stood up, intending to go out, but then suddenly I felt a cold air rush past me. It was like an invisible arm passed by, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I turned around, but the room was unchanged. It's just me and the cold documents on the table. However, at this moment I realized something strange. The papers had begun to move. They weren't simply lying still on the table anymore, but they seemed to move. Gently, inexplicably, as if an invisible force was moving them. My heart beat harder, each beat like a warning. I turned around and rushed out of the room without looking back once. My footsteps pounded on the cold floor, and I didn't dare stop. I have to get out of here, I have to escape the suffocation of this building. But when I turned through the hallway, once again, I saw a shadow. This time, the black shadow did not stand still like before. It moves. Slowly, but surely, as if approaching me. No, it can't be true. It's not a person. It is not a creature of flesh and blood. I felt it was something else, something invisible and haunting. That shadow had no legs, no arms, just a blurry black mass, but every time it moved, the air became thicker, as if a heavy object was moving through it. I was so scared that I couldn't think of anything else but running. Run away from it, from this deadly space. But as I started rushing towards the stairs, I suddenly heard laughter. A chuckle, soft but spooky, rang out from somewhere in the darkness. I couldn't determine its origin, but it was definitely not human. An unfamiliar laugh echoed in the silence. I stood back, trying to distinguish the sound. The laughter became clearer and clearer, not a happy laugh but a mischievous, ghostly laugh, as if someone was watching me from behind. The flow of emotions inside me flared up like a rolling wave. I turned around, looked into the darkness, but saw nothing. There was only the cold, and a quiet space full of danger. I started shaking. Cold sweat poured out, sticking to my shirt, making me feel like I couldn't stand it anymore. I cannot stand firmly in this space, where the existences of invisible beings are intertwined, where I cannot distinguish the line between reality and illusion. I decided to open the office door, where I had left those strange papers. I couldn't understand them, but I felt like I had to go back there, to find out what was going on. But when I opened the door, everything got darker. The smell of mold was strong, the air seemed to be gnawing at the life in the room. Suddenly, I saw a faint light flash from the back of the room, right under the foot of a table. I approached, my heart pounding in my chest. Where does that light come from? No way, this building has no other light source other than those flickering fluorescent lights. As I approached the table, the light suddenly turned off. A cold feeling came over me, as if someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, and this time, I saw a figure standing right behind me. A figure with no face, only bright eyes, stared at me. Those eyes are not human. They have no pupils, just a pair of empty eyes, as black as the abyss. My heart stopped beating for a moment. That shadow didn't move, didn't make any sound. Only thick silence enveloped me. Those eyes still looked at me, never leaving. I can't move. I can't breathe. I could only stand and watch it, while fear rose like a wave, engulfing me. Then suddenly, that black shadow disappeared. But the remaining silence did not disappear. It covers me, covers every step I take. Everything around me was empty and gloomy, as if I was lost in a space with no way out. The entire building is no longer a workplace. It was a prison, another world, where life and death were intertwined, where I didn't know if I would ever get out. Suddenly, a light flashed from somewhere ahead. I walked towards it, despite the fear welling up in my heart. But as I got closer, the light went out. Everything fell into darkness again. And then, I heard a whisper. The whispers were incomprehensible, they were like a wordless warning. My eyes gradually blurred, my body began to feel cold, and I knew that I had no way to escape this place. I can't get out. Even though I tried to turn back, even though I ran with all my might, this building still wouldn't let me go. The doors, the hallways, all rotate like an endless maze. Every step I take leads me back to the starting place. It seems like every time I think I've found a way out, something pulls me back, forcing me back to this place. At this point, I no longer had the strength to convince myself that everything was just an illusion, or due to lack of sleep. Everything is so real, so vivid. I was starting to feel like I wasn't myself anymore. The feeling that someone is watching me is no longer just a paranoia, but an undeniable truth. It feels like someone is right next to me, right in the dark. If I just close my eyes, they will immediately appear. I tried to stop, regain my composure, but I couldn't. I kept walking without knowing what I was looking for. There were only strange sounds echoing in the quiet space, creaking doors, gentle breathing, as if someone was chasing me from behind. Once again, I heard a whisper, this time clearer, coming from the end of the hallway. A voice that wasn't human, didn't belong to anyone visible, but was so close that I could feel its breath. The whispers were like fragmented pieces, difficult to understand. There was only one thing I could feel: be alert. Be alert. They're getting close. My heart beat harder, my mind was spinning. Unable to bear it anymore, I rushed towards that whisper, like a madman, hoping that if I got close, I would understand the warning. But when I approached, I found nothing but an empty wall, no one, nothing. There were only cold walls and absolute silence. I stood still, staring into empty space, trying to understand what was happening. A strange feeling crept into my body, as if I was losing control of everything around me. Every step I took became slow, as if space was pulling me back. I don't know if I'm stuck in a nightmare or what, but I can't wake up. Everything was just an endless spiral, pushing me into confusion and panic. Just like that, I continued to move, blurred in space, like a shadow in this very building. And then, I came to an area I had never seen before. A door I've never opened, a secret place that no one talks about. When I walked in, I immediately felt the difference. This space was unlike any other in the building. The musty smell, the strange metallic smell, and a bone-chilling cold feeling made me feel like I was standing in a space out of this world. This room is dark, with only glimmers of light from old fluorescent lights, emitting dim rays of light. Old, worn wooden tables stacked on top of each other, and a large, blank whiteboard, like a control panel that was never used. I looked at every detail in the room, and suddenly, I realized something strange. The walls were not concrete or brick like I thought. They seemed to be made from a different material, softer, and seemed to be able to breathe. A strange feeling arose within me, as if this building was living and breathing, as if it was looking at me. As soon as I turned around, I noticed something moving in the darkness. A shadow, looming, faint. A figure stood just outside the light, not human, but shaped like one. His eyes were dark, without pupils, like two deep holes sucking in light. It stood there, not moving, just looking at me, waiting for me to look back. In just a moment, I felt a coldness invade my entire body, making it impossible for me to breathe. My fingers trembled as I began to realize that I wasn't the only one in this building. There was something waiting for me, watching me, and it wasn't just a ghost or a strange phenomenon anymore. It is something living, something conscious, purposeful, and I am part of it. The figure slowly moved towards me. I couldn't move, couldn't run, couldn't do anything but stand there, watching that shadow. Suddenly, all the lights in the room went out, and I was left in absolute darkness. This stillness, this absolute silence, made me feel like I had been transported into another dimension, where there was no way out. When the light turned on again, the figure had disappeared. I couldn't believe my eyes anymore. I can't explain what just happened. But I know for sure, this building is not an ordinary place. It was something else, a living creature, drawing me into its depths. And the most terrible thing is, I can't get out. Every step I take in this building now feels like a battle against fear, an unwinnable struggle. This building has long since ceased to be a workplace or a familiar space. It has become a monster, a living entity, full of mystery and no escape. After the shadow disappeared from the room, I no longer knew what to do. Everything around me is blurry, unclear. I feel like I'm in another space, not this world anymore. This world, or more accurately this building, seems to have no beginning or end. Every hallway, every room looked the same, as if I was stuck in a maze with no way out. I feel like I'm drifting in a terrible dream that I can't wake up from. Suddenly, a strange sound rang out, from somewhere in front of me. This time, it wasn't a whisper, but the sound of footsteps. The footsteps were unmistakable, heavy and slow, as if someone was following me. My heart was pounding, but I didn't dare turn back. I knew that there was no one there. It couldn't be anyone else but that black shadow. The sound of footsteps kept coming closer, seemingly non-stop. I can't do anything but keep moving forward. But not to run away. The strange feeling inside me grew stronger. Everything around me, from the walls to the doors, began to change. They seem to be alive, as if they are changing shape. Suddenly, I found myself standing in front of another door. The door was unlike any door I had seen in this building. It was old and musty, as if it had been neglected for many years. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to open that door. It was as if some invisible force was pulling me closer to it. It strangely felt like an order that I couldn't resist. When I opened the door, I couldn't believe my eyes. Behind the door is not a room or a hallway. It is a completely different space. A dark, deep space, as if it had no limits. In the darkness, I felt a heavy presence, as if a million eyes were looking at me from behind that black curtain. A gentle sound rang out, a voice as soft as a whisper. Finally, you came. That voice didn't belong to anyone who could be seen, but it had a strange power that made me unable to help but listen. At this point, I felt like I could no longer control myself. My limbs felt paralyzed, unable to move, unable to escape. I could only stand and look at the darkness before my eyes. Darkness seemed to engulf me, covering my body. A heavy feeling came over me, as if someone was pulling me inside, into another world. And when I couldn't take it anymore, I heard laughter. Not human, but a ghostly laugh, echoing in the space. It was not a laugh of joy, but a laugh of contempt, of despair. That laughter seemed to shatter in the quiet space. And then, like an irresistible impulse, I stepped into the darkness. One step, then another, each step I took became heavier and heavier. I felt like I was being pulled into a world that I couldn't explain. When I fully entered, I didn't see anything. There is only darkness. An unbearable darkness. But I heard a whisper again, soft words like waves hitting my ears. The whispers seemed to talk about me, about things I never knew. Those voices spoke of the past, of the people who had been here, of the secrets buried in this earth. You can't escape. It's all been arranged in advance. This time, that voice was more than a whisper. It rang in my head, like a cruel truth. I turned around, but the door panel was gone. The building is no longer an ordinary building. It has become something else. A living creature, covering me. A feeling of panic welled up inside me. I started running, trying to find a way out, but every door I opened led me back to where I started. Every hallway is the same. The walls, the windows, everything became blurred, as if they were changing every moment. And then, I stopped. I can't run anymore. Cold sweat drenched my body, and my heart felt like it was about to burst. I stood in the middle of an unknown space, unable to determine where I was, unable to distinguish what was real and what was a dream. Once again, the voice rang out, this time clearer than ever, in a dark affirmation. You're part of it, and you'll never get out. I knelt down, feeling like I was sinking into endless darkness. And in that moment, I realized that I was caught in a never-ending vortex. This building is not a place. It was an entity, a living organism, eating away at my mind. And I am a part of it. I can't remember how long I've been gone, nor can I remember where I was or where I went. Everything in this building has become a never-ending nightmare. A terrible dream that I can't wake up from, a space that I can't escape from. My steps began to feel heavy, my body no longer had the strength to continue running. But I don't dare stop. Because if I stop, I will never be able to continue. This silence is weighing me down, making it impossible for me to breathe easily. The feeling of suffocation and panic kept rising, with no signs of stopping. The darkness around me seemed thicker. This space has no life, no light. It's just me, and this dead space. I couldn't see anything beyond the faint outlines of the walls, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't get out. That feeling is clearer than ever. It feels like someone is here, right in this darkness, watching my every move. But the strange thing was, I couldn't feel anything but a vague fear, as if I wasn't alone. Sounds continuously echoed from everywhere in this quiet space, but I could not determine their origin. Maybe it was my own footsteps, or just the sound of this dead space reflecting back. There was a gentle voice in my head, not an actual sound, but as if it were speaking from within my mind. You can't get out. At this point, I could no longer see anything but vague memories of strange events in this building. I thought about the sounds I had heard before, the creaking doors, the endless whispers with no one in sight, the shadows that passed before me, and I couldn't identify what they were. Everything was slowly disappearing in my head, but there was a strange feeling as if I was being pulled into something inexplicable. I walked to a corner of the hallway, where the light from a fluorescent bulb flickered weakly, not nearly bright enough to see anything clearly. Suddenly, I felt a cold wind blowing, as if someone had just passed by, right next to me. I stood dumbfounded. Anyone who passes through there will leave a mark. But I didn't see anyone. There was just a strange damp smell rising from the surrounding walls. The smell of decay, of things never to be discovered. This feeling is inexplicable, but I know for sure that this place is not an ordinary place. It is not a building. It is an organism. A living organism, of which I am only a part. A part that it is slowly devouring. This time, I couldn't bear it anymore. I have to find out the truth, I have to know what's going on. But every time I enter a new room, I see a slight change, something different, as if the building knows I'm trying to escape, and it's changing to trap me. The walls weren't made of brick or concrete like I thought they would be. They were soft, as if they were breathing, as if they had a strange power to bind me. Suddenly, I stood in front of a closed room. This door, like an old wooden door, was unlike any door I had ever seen in this building. It has a strange symbol engraved on its surface. A closed circle with a cross in the middle. Looking at it, I felt an unreasonable fear engulf me. There seemed to be a warning in that sign, something I couldn't understand. At this point, I realized I couldn't avoid it anymore. I have to walk through that door. This door is not just a passage, but it is like a door leading to another world. A world I can't imagine. When I pushed the door open, a cold chill hit my face. It wasn't cold air, but a thick, oppressive wind, as if this space was something completely different. Inside was a large room, but I couldn't see any objects clearly. Everything is covered in darkness. There was only a faint light coming from the corner of the room, reflecting on a glass wall. I got closer, and suddenly, I saw something strange. In the glass, I see more than just my silhouette. I saw another blurry image. A figure stood behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. When I looked into the mirror again, that figure appeared again, closer, clearer, but not human. It was a black figure, faceless, eyeless, but still standing there, staring at me. I can't move. I can't breathe. That shadow, it's waiting for me. Suddenly, the light went out. The room was plunged into complete darkness. In the quiet space, there was only the sound of my breathing, unsteady and uncontrollable. The black shadow still stood there, and I knew I wouldn't be able to escape. A soft laugh rang out, broken in the silence, like an end to everything. I can't escape this place. There was no escaping the creature I was living in. And the most terrible thing is, I don't know if I'm still myself anymore. I felt like I was gradually disappearing into that darkness, merging into this building, like an inseparable part. I no longer recognized myself. My thoughts became hazy, confused in a thick fog of fear. I tried not to let myself think about the strange things in this building, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. It felt like something was always silently watching me from the dark. Those shadows kept appearing and disappearing in the blink of an eye, as if they were waiting for a certain moment to devour me. When the light in the room went out and that black shadow appeared in the mirror, I no longer dared to face it. That shadow was not a human being. It had no clear shape, no face, only a pitch-black body, like a bottomless pit, an invisible, unidentifiable creature. It's something I know well. It's not a person. It is something else. Just as I was about to turn around, looking for a way out, I heard a creak. The door opened softly from behind me. Turning around, I saw a small door slightly open, like one I had never seen in this building. It was like an underground passage, a door that never appeared in these cold concrete walls. The stench assaulted my nose, strong, as if the place hadn't been opened in years, an unpleasant musty smell that made it hard to breathe. But something compelled me to enter. A strange feeling, as if this place was a destination I couldn't avoid. I couldn't control my legs, every step felt like I was being pulled by an invisible force. I can't stop. That feeling of inevitability, it was so strong. The passage inside is narrow and dark. I walked in, but the light wasn't on. This feeling was strange and dangerous, as if this path was not a path for humans. The walls were covered with moss and a thick layer of dust, as if it had been neglected for a long time. I don't know where I'm going, and I don't want to know. But I can't go back. The noises from behind constantly haunted me, whispers, slow footsteps. Suddenly, I saw a small, faint light at the end of the hallway. I rushed towards that light, like a moth drawn to a flame. The closer you step, the stronger the light becomes. But when I got closer, I realized that the light was not real light. It was something coming from an iron cage. An old, opaque iron cage, like an animal cage. At first glance, I thought this was just a harmless object, but when I got closer, I saw the inside of the cage. It was nothing but a white, wet cloth, reaching out like pale fingers. Something was hiding there, something I couldn't see clearly. As I got closer, the fabric suddenly lifted, and I saw that thing. A creature, but not one I could name. It had no eyes, no mouth, only a chaotic black shadow, like flickering flames, whose shape could not be determined. Just as I was about to step back, I heard a voice in my head. "You can't escape." That voice did not belong to a human. It was cold, emotionless, as if coming from somewhere deep in the darkness. At that time, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. That shadow seemed to have a strange power, pulling me closer to it, forcing me to look at it, at the invisible existence that I could not identify. Suddenly, the iron cage shook, those cloth fingers stretched out as if to grab me. My heart was pounding, I felt like I was about to faint from this horror. And when I turned around to look, the surrounding walls were no longer walls. They deformed, as if they were alive, changing shape. Laughter rang out from somewhere, from behind me, from all directions, making it impossible for me to determine their origin. It was not human laughter, but a ghostly laugh, echoing from an invisible place, piercing through me, making me feel like I was separated from my body. At this point, I no longer know where I am. This space was no longer a building, no longer anything I had ever perceived. It is another place, a space of invisible creatures, forgotten memories, dark secrets that cannot be revealed. I can't go back, I can't stop. I can only keep going, step through each door, each hallway, each darkness, to face something I cannot understand. This building was sucking me into its heart, and I understood that I couldn't escape. I am part of it, inseparable, and I will never leave. I stood there, my hands shaking as I pressed the elevator button, the mechanical noise so loud I could barely hear anything else. But it didn't stop, the elevator sounded slowly, the door kept opening as if everything in this building was slowing down, as if it knew I was preparing to exit. As each second passed in the long, trap-like silence, this building still weighed heavily on me, as if it knew I wanted to go and didn't want to let me go. It was strange, as the reflections from the walls seemed to have become more blurred, as if they were deliberately avoiding me, or as if they were following me. When the elevator doors finally opened, I stepped inside, without looking back. The dark shadows from the hallway were like invisible arms, not touching me, but reaching out, pulling me back, holding me back. Every step I took was as if I was entering another space, where everything was distorted, where every image, every sound was reflected in a strange way. The elevator door closed, and an eerie silence fell around me. But just when I thought I could be quiet, the silence was broken by a soft creak, from deep within the building. It was like the sound of something heavy, moving, being dragged through long, endless hallways. My heart was pounding, it felt as if I was trapped in a nightmare from which I would never wake up. I can't explain that sound, but I feel it. That was not a normal noise. It is not a mechanical sound, not a human sound. It came from somewhere far away, an unknown origin, and it was getting closer. This building not only reflects sounds, but also reflects emotions, fears that I cannot control. The elevator started moving, but it wasn't the same as before. It moved more slowly, as if there was some resistance. It felt as if something was stopping me from leaving. As the elevator moved, I tried to look at the display, but it didn't change. The number just stood still, as if time had stopped. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through me, making me shiver. It wasn't a natural wind, but something different, a dark, misty wind, as if someone was waiting for me downstairs. I felt my body getting colder, as if I was entering another space, not this building anymore. Then, when I almost couldn't bear it any longer, the elevator suddenly stopped. The door did not open immediately. There was no sound, just absolute silence. I looked through the glass, but saw nothing but darkness. The space outside the elevator is an endless void, without any signs of humans, without any light. I felt the fear growing stronger. It feels like I'm trapped in another world. Not the world I knew, but a dim, shadowy world where I no longer belonged. Finally, the elevator door opened. But not the ground floor. Not a way out. The elevator opens into a hallway with no clue, no way out. Everything is still the same as before, but has a more strange, distorted look. The walls are strange and distorted, the hallways are longer and darker. It feels like I'm entering a space that doesn't belong at this time. A shadow suddenly appeared in my vision. A faint figure stood right outside the elevator door. It stood still, not moving, only a dim light from behind, forming a blurry shape, making it impossible for me to clearly distinguish what it was. But I know for sure that it's not a human. The shadow stood there, motionless, silent, like an invitation to enter the dark realm, where all boundaries between reality and virtuality are blurred. Cold sweat drenched the back of my shirt, my breathing was rapid as if it were being suffocated. I turned around, but the elevator door had closed tightly behind me, as if there had never been any way out. Can't go back. Can't escape. I was forced to step out of the elevator and slowly walk towards the shadow. Each step echoed like an echo in my own maze. I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what I'm looking for, I just know that something, some invisible force, is pulling me forward. And then, when I was only a few steps away, the shadow disappeared into nothingness. It was at that moment that I understood, I was not alone in this building. There's not just one ghost, but many. And I became a part of that. When entering the old apartment complex, an invisible pressure seemed to weigh heavily on my whole body. Although the hallway was dimly lit by dim light bulbs flickering on the ceiling, although the cracked walls and peeling paint were nothing unusual, something unnameable seemed to be lurking in the air. Everything here is covered with a layer of blur, like forgotten memories are coming to life. The sound of my footsteps echoed on the old tile floor, not just the sound of a presence, but like the awakening of something that had been dormant for a long time. Something is always waiting for me. The feeling of unease came not only from the unusual noises I heard, but also from a deeper feeling, a feeling I couldn't explain, but I couldn't escape. The pipes rattle every time the neighbor takes a shower, the elevator groans as if lamenting each floor it passes, and the tiny creaking sounds that you have to listen closely to recognize. It all seems like a constant symphony of aging, of time spent too long in this house. Each sound is like a reminder that this building has witnessed secrets no one knows about. I told myself I could endure the building's oddness. It's just an old property, part of the bustling city heart. But every night, I heard a strange, recurring sound around 2 a.m., slow, deliberate footsteps walking right above my bedroom. At first, I tried to explain that it could be someone's footsteps upstairs. But that sound was not like normal walking. It was heavy and slow, as if someone was moving with a clear purpose, as if some entity was watching my every move. Night after night, those steps never changed. Every time I listen, I feel tense and scared. Then one night, I couldn't stand it anymore. Footsteps, as usual, echoed from the ceiling. But this time, there's something different. Not light footsteps, not noise from a neighbor walking around. It was a strange noise, as if someone was trudging slowly and heavily, with each distinct step, seemingly deliberately trying to attract attention. Suddenly, in the silence of the room, I felt an inexplicable presence. I couldn't make out what it was, but it was clearer than ever. Something is standing right outside my door. That feeling is not human. It was cold and unsettling, and I felt as if invisible eyes were staring at me from behind the door. I stood still, not daring to move. That shadow, that unrecognizable entity, just stood still, as if waiting for me to do something. With each passing second, I felt the tension and fear rising. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. No words escaped my throat, only a crushing silence. Until I couldn't stand it anymore, I rushed out of the room, hurried down the stairs, ignoring everything. But as I entered the hallway, I noticed something strange. The walls seemed to be changing. They seemed to shrink, as if they were forcing me into a tight space, leaving me no way out. I felt my heart racing, as if everything around me was changing. My steps got faster and faster, and then, when I looked in the mirror at the end of the hallway, I saw a silhouette. It's not my image, but a blurry black shadow standing right behind me. I turned around immediately, but there was no one there. There was no one, but I felt that presence very clearly. There was something behind me, not a person, not an object, but something dark, incomprehensible. A cold wind blew through me. Not from the window or door, but from this space itself. It was so cold that my skin felt numb. I didn't dare turn around, didn't dare look into that darkness, but it kept following me, forcing me to face it. That feeling is getting stronger and stronger. I can't explain it, but I know for sure that I'm not the only one living in this apartment. There is something else, an invisible thing controlling me, watching my every move. The repeating footsteps at night constantly follow me, like a ghost that cannot be dispelled. Standing in this apartment, I realized that the feeling of tension had risen in every cell of my body, like a blockage in my chest that I couldn't exhale. The unexplained sounds increased, and as I tried to ignore them, they became clearer, closer, to the point where I felt them with every heartbeat. The thuds were heavy enough to make the ceiling vibrate, like someone was wearing worn-out shoes on a hardwood floor. Each of those sounds served as an undeniable reminder that someone, or something, was moving above me. At first, I tried to ignore it. But then I learned from the manager, a haggard man who never seemed to blink, that the apartment above mine had been empty for months. He said in a tired, almost robotic tone that it had been a while since anyone had unlocked that door. His words made me shiver, cold from the inside out. If that apartment is empty, then who is making those steps? The question kept circling in my head, repeating every time I heard a loud thump at night. I couldn't understand it, and I couldn't get rid of that worry. I tried to explain that maybe the director was wrong, or that some maintenance worker had temporary access to the apartment. But I know deep inside that my excuses ring hollow, like something that cannot be denied. And then, after a few sleepless nights, curiosity and frustration pushed me upstairs to check it out for myself. The hallway above me was dimly lit, with the bulbs covered in a layer of grime, the light radiating weakly, lifeless, and illuminating only the scratched tiles. When I arrived at the apartment door, I noticed deep scratches carved into the wood around the doorknob, claw-like marks, that made my heart pound. The door handle was stiff, and when I checked, I found it locked. Pressing my ear against the broken surface of the door, I heard nothing but my own shallow breathing, a heavy silence pressing down on me. But I couldn't escape the feeling that something was listening to me, standing behind that door, watching my every move. The footsteps began again at night, as if they had started again at 2 a.m. This time they were so loud that my bed shook with each impact, and my heart beat so violently that I felt my pulse in my neck. No matter how panicked I was, I forced myself to stand still and listen attentively. Walk from side to side across the ceiling, slowly, deliberately. Sometimes they stop, as if invisible pedestrians are standing right above my head, waiting. Waiting for how I react. Waiting, I felt fear rising in my heart. I was clutching the bed sheets, sweat pouring down my forehead, while an inexplicable chill filled the room. I searched desperately for any sign of explanation, but there was nothing. I took my phone, tremblingly recording the noise, my hands unable to hold the device steady, my body reacting like a surge of adrenaline. I let the machine record for several minutes, each shuffle, each pause in the footsteps. In the morning, I replayed the file, both afraid and expecting to hear the same ominous thudding sounds. But instead, I was greeted by a garbled low-frequency hiss, which made my skin crawl. There were no discernible footsteps, no creaks, just a long, quiet hum like a prolonged exhalation through an ancient microphone. Anxiety throbbed on my scalp. I felt like my phone was malfunctioning, or something was intentionally hiding the sound. That presence cannot be denied, it is not a coincidence. I asked a few neighbors, some barely acknowledged me, others offered vague opinions about old buildings making strange noises. An elderly tenant mentioned that the person who used to live upstairs had suddenly moved out, leaving behind furniture and other objects. The man's eyes shone with speechless worry, but he refused to say more. When I thanked him, I couldn't shake the impression that he felt relieved to not be part of it, as if everyone in the building had collectively decided not to pay attention to the inexplicable. This silence, this ignoring, all became a kind of torture to my nerves. Even the slightest noise on the floorboards makes my heart flutter. Every time I hear footsteps, I tense up, get scared, as if something scary is approaching. My apartment seemed to smother me in daytime silence. No matter how many windows I opened, the air still clung to my skin, cold like a roll of film, a feeling of despair that couldn't be shaken off. My sleep has become restless, unsettling dreams in which I wander through a hallway where paint peels off the walls, and tattered canvases reveal rotting wood. That stretch of hallway seemed to be twisting and shifting, looking more and more like a space I couldn't leave, as if I'd entered a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. And in that nightmare, I realized something terrible. There was something in this building, something waiting for me, and I couldn't get out. I can't stop. Panic had completely taken over my body. Every step felt like a failed attempt to escape this space, a space that I knew definitely did not belong to me. As I read the words on the yellowed paper in the envelope, a coldness passed through my body, as if I were standing face to face with something terrible, something that could not be explained in any way. At that time, I couldn't understand who wrote this note. And why is there something sinister lurking in the apartment above? The footsteps are just a part of the entity. What entity? Read those words as if they were a warning, a prophecy from a place I couldn't get close to. I felt a raw, frantic energy radiating from every word, and although I tried to play it off as a joke, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight would be a turning point. All night, I couldn't sleep. The footsteps became clearer. Every step felt heavier, vibrating through the floor beams. Every impact made me feel like there was an invisible weight pressing down on my body. The footsteps were no longer a vague sound, but a clear, purposeful presence, as if they were intentionally tormenting me. I can't stand that feeling, the feeling of not being able to escape, not being able to stop, like an endless nightmare. Suddenly, I realized something strange. A chill ran down my spine. As the flickering light of the flashlight passed across the ceiling, I caught a glimpse of a shadow, like a faded image, fading and disappearing instantly. My heart was racing. I couldn't stop looking into the darkness. I didn't dare to continue walking into that room, but my feet seemed hypnotized, as if there was an invisible force pushing me forward. When I stepped over the stairs into the room above, I felt an air so cold that it paralyzed my body. The door of that room, although locked, opened to a space that I could not touch. Inside, an old wooden chair sat facing the wall, where a large crack ran from the ceiling to the floor. The carpet dimmed the light, but did nothing to soften the horror in this room. I don't understand how anyone could leave that chair like that. Suddenly, I heard a noise from behind, the front door closing, sounding like a warning. This noise is a reminder that I can't leave here, can't escape. I felt like the blood vessels in my body were freezing. Cold sweat broke out, and I couldn't move. Silence covered the space, but it was like a punishment. Something wanted me to stay, wanted me to continue facing the incomprehensible. When the light from my flashlight shined on the cracked wall, I saw strange marks, as if something was trying to crawl through the wall, waiting to get out. A feeling of horror came over me. I walked out, but couldn't leave. My hands trembled. I could only continue to move forward in overwhelming fear. And then, those steps began again. This time, not from the apartment above. They came from the hallway, right under my feet. Those steps were slow, purposeful. They moved with me, never stopping. They were a threat, a reminder of something dark and invisible that awaited me. Those are not human steps. It was like some unidentifiable entity, and it was following me. My heart was pounding so hard that I couldn't breathe. It was like a crushing pain in my chest. I feel like I'm slowly dying in this very room. Unable to stop, unable to turn back, I rushed out of the room, feeling like the whole building was shrinking, wanting to swallow me up. When I turned back to look, the weak light from the flashlight could not ease the haunting darkness around me. I could no longer see any figures, but the feeling of fear still weighed heavily on me, as if something was lurking in the darkness, right behind me. A second later, I heard footsteps suddenly stop. No more noise. That stuffy space now seems to have become a trap, holding me back and not letting me escape. Cold sweat poured down my forehead. I felt a shadow suddenly come from a dark corner, wrapping around me. Amidst the darkness, there was nothing but horrifying silence. The tension didn't lessen, no matter how hard I tried to shake it off, trying to pretend that what I was experiencing was just a series of random incidents. But it can't stop haunting me. That shadow, those nameless footsteps, and the strange presence in the house became a part of my life that I couldn't escape. No matter how hard I try to avoid it, every night there is still something calling me, following me in silence. When I went back to living in my normal house after long nights of panic attacks, I thought I would find peace. But no, that feeling still refused to leave. I had lived in this house for 5 years, a modest house with a small living room overlooking the backyard, old floorboards that creaked when I walked over them. Everything was normal, until the lights started to go out. At first, I thought it was just the electrical system aging. I am a normal man with a normal job, not the type of person who is easily superstitious or has paranoid thoughts. However, as the light bulbs kept burning out, anxiety began to gnaw at me. I remember one time calling an electrician to check the electrical system. He rummaged through the house, opened the fuse box, and then shined a flashlight into the attic. After checking, he said everything was normal and advised me to replace the power cord if I felt uncomfortable. But according to him, there was no problem with the electrical system. Even so, I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange, invisible, existed in this house. Since then, I decided to completely overhaul the electrical system. I installed a top-of-the-line surge protector and replaced all the cables, hoping that this would give me peace of mind. But the silence of the house makes me uncomfortable. The light bulbs continued to go off, one after another, strangely, as if something inexplicable was manipulating them. Every night, I began to feel an invisible weight on my chest. As expected, the lights started going off again at night, this time more continuously, as if the house couldn't stop emitting strange signals. Every time I hear the sizzling sound of a light bulb going off, my heart starts pounding. I staggered from my seat, staring at the blackened light bulbs, my hands shaking as I tried to replace them. Despite everything I tried, the light kept going off, and I couldn't explain why. Every time the light bulbs began to dim, I felt like someone was watching me from the darkness. That feeling continued, never stopping. That unbearable feeling caused me to live in constant anxiety, to the point where I could barely sleep. My sleep became restless, with haunting dreams in which I wandered through the hallways of my old house, where the peeling walls and rotten wood floors twisted and shifted, as if they were trying to get me. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night, only to discover that my room was so eerily silent that it was almost unbearable. I felt that presence return again, like there was something standing just outside my vision. My heart beat fast, and in that moment, I felt I couldn't escape this house. I wondered if I could survive such long nights, or if I was starting to lose my mind because of what I had been through. But then, one night, everything became quiet again. Just when I thought I could have some peace, I started to notice a strange phenomenon. The light in my living room started flickering again, fading as if it were breathing. This is not a normal phenomenon. It was the fourth light bulb in less than a month, an inexplicable phenomenon. Every time I stared into that faint light, I felt like the whole world was holding its breath. The silence, the irregularity in that space left me unable to do anything but stare at the light, waiting for something indescribable to happen. The feeling of being watched returned. I could feel that presence standing in the corner, something invisible but making me shiver. In the dark night, I realized that I could never escape it. It was still there, waiting, watching, playing with me like a prey that couldn't escape its grasp. This time, I couldn't shake that feeling. Every step I took could lead to some terrifying encounter, and I wasn't sure if I could survive it with my mind intact. I can't understand. Every night, I hear the familiar sizzling sound of the light bulb in the living room. It wasn't the old sound of a faulty electrical system, it wasn't a normal phenomenon that I could explain rationally. That light, it's not like other light bulbs. Every time the light dimmed, I felt like something was trapping me in the darkness, in a space I couldn't escape. That feeling, this inexplicable fear, began to take hold of me little by little. It's no longer the fleeting worry like before. Now, it is a feeling engraved in my heart, waiting to explode, making me unable to breathe, unable to move. I didn't dare go out at night, didn't dare look into the dark, didn't dare step into the living room when the lights started flashing. I felt imprisoned in my own home, where every time I turned off the lights was a reminder that something was waiting for me. One night, as I lay in bed, the light in the living room started flickering again, not from a single bulb, but from all of them. I couldn't resist, even though I knew I shouldn't get out of bed. But I couldn't stop looking at that light. Weak streaks of light shined through the door, shining on the ceiling, as if something was sneaking into this space. I can't bear it anymore. I jumped up from the bed, my limbs shaking, and walked out of the room. That light became even clearer, as if trying to beckon me, forcing me to face something I couldn't understand. Every step I take is like an attempt to escape the very existence of this house. But it doesn't let me escape. When I entered the living room, I saw something I couldn't believe my eyes. All the lights are off, but not because the power is gone. They still glowed faintly, as if something invisible was pulling them downward. I looked at the wall, where the old light bulbs still hung, but the light from them was no longer as transparent as before. It was patchy and distorted, as if they were swimming in the dark, unable to keep straight. And then I saw the most terrible thing in a moment. On the floor, next to the wall, was a flickering black figure. Not a shadow of a person. Not a shadow of an object. Just a blur, lingering, expanding like something gradually forming from the darkness. My heart stopped. It felt like an invisible arm was pressing on my chest, making it impossible for me to breathe. The shadow had no face, no eyes, no specific shape, but it moved, not like a person walking, but like something indefinable, something from another dimension. As I stood there, motionless, unable to move, the shadow seemed to slowly approach me, sliding across the floor without making a single sound. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run away, but my feet were frozen. And then, the shadow suddenly disappeared. There was no sign that it had moved, just empty, silent space. But I can't escape the feeling that it's still here, right in this house. Not in a form that I could see, but as an invisible presence, watching me, waiting for me. Since that night, I couldn't sleep well anymore. The strange noises, flashing lights, and shadowy figures never stop. They have become a part of my life, a part that I cannot avoid. With every step I take in this house, I cannot avoid the feeling that I am being watched, that there is something waiting for me in the darkness, right behind me. Every night, I feel like I'm stuck in a trap that I can't get out of. This building is more than just a place to live. It is an entity, a living thing, and I am its prey. Every night, I have to face it. Those footsteps, those shadows, they weren't just strange things. They are part of this building, part of something inexplicable. I can't leave. I couldn't find another place to escape. And in the darkness, I knew it was approaching. Every step I take, I feel its presence. I felt the cold, the dimness, the thick darkness enveloping me. It's not just in this house. It's inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened, about all the strange signs I couldn't explain. The lights went out, the footsteps were inaudible, panic pounded in my chest every night. This house, this living room, has now become an invisible trap that I cannot escape. Every time I try to shake it off, it clings to me even more. I have tried everything to bring life back to normal, including replacing a new electrical system, hoping it will help me erase these unfounded feelings of anxiety. But no, the situation only got worse. The lights had strangely turned off, and now the tension came not only from the light but also from something invisible, like a menacing presence was surrounding me. Last night, I decided to try one last plan, a true test. I would sit in the living room until the light bulb went off again. All the lights in the house were turned off, leaving only the dim light from the weak living room lamp shining, creating long dark shadows on the walls and floor. Everything was silent, too silent. My heartbeat was pounding, and I tried to let my eyes adjust to the darkness. I heard my own breathing, heavy and choked. There was nothing but silence. I don't know how long I sat there, but fear began to take over my mind. Everything seemed to stop moving. That feeling came back again, the feeling that I wasn't alone in this room. Suddenly, the light went out, and the room was swallowed in pure darkness. My heart stopped beating, my jaw clenched. I listened, but there was only eerie silence. There were no footsteps, no creaking of the door, only a dense silence that invaded the space. Then, a small noise, like a hiss, rang out from somewhere in the darkness. Before I could fully understand, I felt a cold air blowing across my face. I turned around, but there was nothing. There is only darkness. At this point, I started to feel something strange. Anxiety and fear clung to me, as if I was being watched. Every movement in my peripheral vision could have been something lurking, but when I looked back, there was no one, just empty space. The shadow I had seen last time in the living room, seemed to be standing just outside my field of vision. I couldn't escape the feeling that it was there, waiting. The tension in my body increased continuously. Every second that passed felt like I was being engulfed in a dark, hopeless space. I sat still, motionless, not knowing what to do other than wait for something to happen. And then, just when I thought I could take it anymore, suddenly the lights came back on. Not in a normal way. But inexplicably, a strong beam of light from the lamp on the ceiling illuminated the room. But the strange thing is, I cannot feel comfort from that light. It just made me feel exposed, as if there was nothing but me and the thick shadows filling the room. That strange feeling made me think that I was being watched from every direction, from every dark corner that I couldn't see. I couldn't understand why things were the way they were, but I knew one thing for sure, that shadow, that presence, was trying to take over my mind and soul. I can't leave, I can't escape that obsession. The feeling of that presence was beyond my control. Even when I try to keep myself calm, I can't stop thinking about it. I tried searching for rational explanations, trying everything to convince myself that everything was just a product of anxiety and stress. But the truth is, I can't deny that haunting feeling, the feeling like there's something always watching me, never letting me go. After a conversation with my friend who suggested I record strange events, I started writing down everything I experienced. Every little detail, every feeling, every event seems to have become part of an inexplicable story. I began meticulously recording what happened to me. I was starting to worry, but I couldn't stop. Every step I take in this house, every flicker of light, could be a clue, a sign of a presence I can't see, but it's there. And every night, when darkness falls, I hear that noise again. Light footsteps, strange hissing sounds in the space. I don't know if I can continue living in this house long term, but I know one thing, I can't leave. Something has tied me to this place, and I can't escape it. That night, I decided to face my fears. Every time the light bulb went off, I felt myself getting further away from the truth, but that strange presence still followed me. I am determined not to let it overcome me, not to let it gain control. I sat there, in the dark, to see if I could notice anything unusual. I turned off all the lights in the house, leaving only the faint glow from the turned-off TV. That light, I noticed, even in the darkness, reflected more clearly what I couldn't see with the naked eye. I sat quietly, my senses tense like a string, every sound, no matter how small, made me restless. Blood rushed through the silence, and I felt every breath I took. Beads of sweat broke out on my forehead, as if my body was warning itself of something about to happen. The light above my head faded, as if darkness was pulling at it, plunging it into the abyss. I felt that presence, that sense of something tall, dark and quiet, and I felt my stomach tighten, the nausea rising in my throat. I wanted to turn around, wanted to see that thing, but my instincts told me not to. If I look at it, something worse could happen. For a brief moment, I just stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen, in the empty living room. I felt like I was watching a nightmare pass, but I couldn't escape. My breathing became rapid, my heart pounded so hard that I felt like it could burst at any moment. I realized that I was caught up in an obsession that I couldn't explain, and I couldn't deny it anymore. The next day, I tried the rituals I had read about for banishing ghosts. I burned sage, sprinkled salt on the doors, and whispered words of protection under my breath, hoping that they would keep that presence out. But nothing changed. The light bulbs continued to flicker strangely, and that feeling of oppression did not go away. Every day, the tension in my body increased. Every time I walk into the living room, I can't help but feel like something is watching me, waiting for me somewhere in the dark. Fatigue began to take over my body, but I couldn't leave this house. It feels like something invisible is following me, watching my every step. The fear became paralyzing. I didn't know what to do but continue to live in constant tension. One evening, when I could hardly bear it any longer, I decided to leave the house. I cannot live in this fear any longer. I packed my things and set off to an old wooden house located in the countryside, hoping that the peaceful atmosphere here would help me find peace. However, as soon as I set foot in that house, I realized that everything was not as I thought. My breathing became heavy, as if an invisible force was pressing on my body. The house, although small and simple, had a strange feel. The wooden walls made soft noises, as if they were whispering to each other. The atmosphere here was thick, not like the quiet I expected. Every step in the house made slight echoes, as if something was watching me. As I entered the living room, I looked out the window, where tall grass swayed in the wind. Everything seemed peaceful, but that feeling, the feeling of being watched, never left me. I can feel the presence of something in this house, something I cannot see, but is always there, waiting for me. Every night, I hear strange sounds, light, purposeful footsteps, just like last time in my old house. That shadow, that presence, continues to follow me. But now, I not only feel it in my house but also here, in this new house. I cannot run away from it. I cannot escape it. And that feeling, that inexplicable, haunting feeling, is still there. Even though I've moved and changed, it never leaves me. Those footsteps, those shadows, they will never stop following me. Even though I had left the old house, the silence in this wooden house still could not dispel the feeling of fear that clung to me. The first night in this house, I thought I had escaped the clutches of that shadow and those strange footsteps. But I quickly realized that no amount of peace could hide the truth. Every night, the noises still returned. At first, I thought maybe it was just the sound of the wind whistling through the door, the sound of tree branches hitting the window. But then, the sound became clearer, more detailed, as if someone was walking through the house. Footsteps sounded, gently, without haste, as if waiting for something. And every time I tried to open my eyes, I felt a presence in the room, just outside my vision, as if someone was standing there waiting for me to peer into the darkness. The wooden walls of the house emit light hissing sounds, the sound of the wear and tear of time. I couldn't explain this feeling. It wasn't the comforting silence I expected from a country house, but a menacing stillness. It was like a trap, slowly and imperceptibly, swallowing me up little by little. One rainy night, as a strong wind blew through the house, I sat in the living room, trying to calm down. I placed the flashlight next to me, prepared if something happened. Suddenly, the light flickered and was weak. I looked up and saw the shadow on the wall moving. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shadow of myself, but then I realized that the shadow was not mine. It had no discernible shape, just a blur, gliding across the wall like an unidentifiable entity. My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't take my eyes off that shadow, couldn't move. And then, that shadow suddenly stopped, as if it was waiting for me. I didn't dare breathe, didn't dare look around, afraid that if I did, would see something unbearable. Suddenly, I felt the atmosphere around me change. It became heavy, dense, as if the room was becoming smaller. The atmosphere became cold, and I felt like an invisible force was pressing me between four walls. That shadow did not disappear. It was just there, invisibly but very clearly in my mind. At that moment, I realized something scary. This shadow, this presence, is not just a haunting in my mind. It's really here, in this house, in every wall, in the space I can't escape. Unable to bear it anymore, I jumped up from the chair and rushed out of the living room. I didn't dare look back at that darkness, I didn't dare look back at the shadow that had followed me for so long. But as I walked through the door into the hallway, I felt something different. Not a physical phenomenon, but a feeling, a waiting, a presence that is always there, no matter where I go. I felt like everything around me started to change. Every step I take seems less certain, as if this house is changing every moment. Footsteps began to sound again, not from far away, but right behind me. I turned around, but there was no one. There hasn't been anyone since I left my old house, but I can't shake the feeling that someone, or something, is following me, every step of the way. In the days that followed, I began to suspect that this presence was not just a figment of my imagination. There was something in this house, in this space, inexplicable, that existed beneath the surface, waiting for me. Every time I cleaned, every time I walked from room to room, I felt that presence, like someone was standing behind me, like they were always watching me. One evening, I decided I couldn't live in this worry anymore. I learned about rituals and methods to ward off invisible forces. I burned sage, I did everything that I thought could help me escape this obsession. But every time I tried to perform a banishing ritual, those footsteps echoed. They never stopped. One weekend night, I sat in my room, in the dark, wondering how much longer I could endure. I heard footsteps, but this time, they weren't just in this house. They were outside the door, right under the steps, as if they came from another world, a world from which I could not escape. Nothing could prepare me for what I was about to face. The old wooden house still stood there, motionless and quiet, but the obsession in my heart grew bigger and bigger, covering every cell. Strange feelings that I couldn't explain became an inseparable part of my life. And tonight, I know it will return. That presence, that looming shadow in the darkness, that invisible following that I couldn't get rid of, would come again. I can't sleep. All night long I tossed and turned in bed, listening to every little noise, every unconscious movement in this house. I tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, the dark reflections appeared in my mind. Light footsteps on the floor, dark shadows passing through the window, everything became hazy but extremely clear when I opened my eyes. The tension in my body increased by the minute. The coldness in the air, the feeling that someone, or something, was waiting for me, not outside, but right inside this house, right in the space I was living in. I want to get rid of it, but I can't. Every night, it comes back, like a nightmare that never wakes up. One night, when I decided I couldn't take it anymore, I got up from bed, not knowing what to do. I felt as if I was being monitored, my every move was watched by an invisible eye. There was nothing left but darkness, footsteps still echoed, from somewhere in the house. I can't understand, can't explain. I left the bedroom and moved through the hallway, my hand trembling as I clutched the flashlight. That's the only light I can trust right now. My footsteps echoed in the silence, each step a reminder that I couldn't run away. The light from the flashlight shines on the old wooden walls, making the dense darkness more apparent. Shadows passed by, nothing clear, just a strange feeling, as if someone was in the dark corner of the house, waiting for me. I went to the living room, where everything became dim and cold. The wooden walls made soft noises, as if they were talking to each other in the dark. I felt that presence, that inexplicable feeling that something was standing close to me, so close that I could feel its cold breath on my skin. But when I turned around, there was no one. There was nothing but eerie silence. And then, the flashlight I was holding suddenly blinked. The light from it weakened, then suddenly went out. I stood there, in the middle of the living room, surrounded only by thick darkness. That silence, that indescribable feeling of an empty space, made my heart pound. But in that darkness, I felt that presence more clearly than ever. The shadow was near me, standing in the dark, waiting for me to return. Unable to bear it anymore, I rushed out of the living room, but couldn't leave this house. I felt a change in the air, it was thicker, colder, as if an invisible force was pulling me closer. With every step I took, that shadow got closer to me. I could feel it, as if it were standing right behind me, watching me, surrounding me in darkness. The stress, fear, and feeling of utter paralysis took over me completely. I no longer know where I am, I no longer know what I am doing. There is just that presence, always there, in the darkness, in the walls, in every empty space of this house. It's waiting for me, never leaving me. And then, in a moment of despair, I understood something horrifying. I cannot run away from it. It has been a part of me. Every step I take, every place I go, it's still there. That presence, that invisible shadow, has become an inseparable part of my life. The next morning, I looked in the mirror, but couldn't see myself. From deep within my eyes, something dark and fuzzy was looking back at me, waiting for me. I cannot escape it. It is a part of me. That feeling of being watched, that shadow, never left me. Even though I tried many times to chase it away, it always came back, always silently, waiting. I couldn't tell anyone about it, couldn't explain what was happening. Every time I say it, other people just smile, thinking I'm too stressed, but I know I'm not crazy. I know something in this house, within myself, is changing. One night, as I sat in the living room, the dim light from the ceiling lamp flickered again. That shadow, shapeless and faceless, began to move again. This time, it was not only in the dark but could move clearly, as if it knew I was looking at it from this angle. My heart was pounding, I tried to breathe deeply, but the air felt choked in my chest. I told myself that I had to be strong. I can't let it control me anymore. But when the light flickered again and went out, I couldn't do anything but get up and go out into the hallway, where I didn't want to see the darkness anymore. But as soon as I stepped out, I felt a change in the air. The air seemed heavier, as if it was pressing on my body. Every step I took echoed in the quiet space, but there was nothing but that silence, other than the sound of my own breathing. When I looked at the wall, I saw strange cracks, not from the aging of the house, but from something else. These cracks are not normal cracks. They kept moving, like a wound healing itself, as if some force was manipulating the structure of the house. I slowly walked towards the living room, and at this moment, I couldn't help but feel something strange. Every step I took, I felt like someone was following me, very close. But when I turned around, there was no one. That feeling kept weighing on me, as if something was following my every step, watching me from afar, waiting for the right moment to appear. Suddenly, I heard a soft noise, not from the living room but from behind me, from the hallway. Footsteps, gentle but clear. I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm hearing footsteps in this house when I'm the only one here. Suddenly, the tension in my body reached its peak. I can't stand still. I ran towards the hallway, my eyes constantly scanning around the room, but there was no one. It's just me and that feeling, the feeling I can't leave behind. I returned to the living room, only to see that shadow again. This time, it wasn't just standing still in the darkness, it was moving towards me. Those gentle footsteps became clearer. That shadow was tall, dim, unidentifiable. I couldn't breathe, as if my chest was being compressed. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted to run away, but my legs couldn't move. I couldn't figure out if it was really there, or if I was being manipulated by this panic attack. But one thing I am sure of, it is coming closer to me, and with every second, I feel it weakening me, gradually plunging me into endless darkness. Just as it neared, the light suddenly came back on, but only for a moment. I can't understand what's going on. The light is not normal. It just flashed, like something uncontrollable, inexplicable. That shadow immediately disappeared in an instant, as if it was just an illusion, but I knew it was not an illusion. It is real. The tension in my body rose, I could no longer control it. At this time, I realized that I could not live in this house anymore. I cannot live in this feeling that I cannot grasp, cannot explain. I can't bear it anymore. The next morning, I started packing my things, deciding to leave this place forever. But when I walked out of the house, I looked back one last time, I felt that shadow was still here. Even though I can no longer see it, I feel it, as if it is still in this space, waiting for me to return. When I drive, I can't escape the feeling of being watched. I feel like it is following me, not in the house but in every moment, in every step I take. Light and darkness are no longer clear to me. Every time I close my eyes, I feel that shadow waiting for me. Every time I open my eyes, I know that presence is still here, within me. I completed the closure, but the feeling of inescapability still stuck with me. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that it was all just paranoia, that my anxiety attacks and work pressures were the reason I felt strange. But something in the air, a strange tingling on my scalp, confirmed that someone, or something, was watching me with patience. The 5th day after I moved into this wooden house, I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. Every evening, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, convinced that a figure is hovering in my peripheral vision, every time I look at the empty room behind me. The 2 chairs were worn, and the faint light from above made everything in the room dim. Every time I looked at it, an inexplicable feeling came over me, a feeling of dread as if there was a presence waiting for me, standing quietly in the darkness. This feeling is even more pronounced at night. I don't dare look into the closet anymore. That wardrobe, with its old doors, seemed to have a presence of its own. Every time I enter the bedroom, I try to avoid looking there, as if I look at it, something will come out of it. That closet felt like something uncontrollable, something lurking, always waiting for the moment to invade my space. I decided to face this fear. One night, when the room became dark, I stood up and walked towards the closet. The flashlight in my hand shook with anxiety. I can't stop thinking about the strange things that happened before. When I touched the cabinet door, it felt like someone had placed both of their hands forcefully on the bottom of the cabinet's upper shelf, creating a faint mark as if it was being squeezed from the inside. I couldn't ignore that feeling, it felt like someone had touched it, but when I opened the door, there was nothing inside. Part of me wants to believe that I'm just overreacting, that I'm being paranoid. But I can't explain the cold and heavy feeling that covers this space. I returned to the living room, took a deep breath to calm myself, but as soon as I looked into the room, I saw a figure flash across my vision. That shadow, faint and hazy, moved quickly out of my sight. An extreme fear rose within me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I hurried back to the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. That shadow disappeared, but the tension in my body still did not let up. My eyes were tired, and I felt my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I can't breathe. My whole body was as tense as a string, and I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. I convinced myself that these phenomena were the product of excessive anxiety and stress. But when I started thinking about leaving this house, I felt like something, some presence, was preventing me from doing so. One night, when I decided to step outside, I walked through the nearby fields, hoping that the fresh air would help clear my mind. But even when I went out, the tension did not subside. I still feel it, that shadow, that invisible presence following me, no matter where I move. That feeling stuck with me, as if I couldn't escape. When I turned around, I looked at the wooden house, not the comforting silence I was expecting, but a heavy feeling, as if this very house was waiting for me to return. I looked at the window, and in that moment, I thought I saw a shadowy figure in there, something standing quietly in a dark corner of the house. I turned around, but when I looked again, there was nothing. Since that night, the feeling of that presence has become clearer, heavier. Every night, I cannot sleep peacefully. The smallest noises, blurry figures, make me unable to relax, unable to be at peace. I left my old house, but I can't escape the feeling that it still follows me. Everywhere I go, I feel it is waiting for me, watching me. That feeling never goes away. I began to wonder if I had to face my own fears. Or is there really something out there, something invisible, that exists in this house, that exists within me? Stress has become a part of me. It is no longer a fleeting feeling but an inseparable companion that covers every moment of my life. Every night, as darkness falls, I feel it. That shadow, which I couldn't see but was clearly present in space, as if it was waiting for me in the dark. Something invisible, inexplicable, always there, in the corners that I dare not look at. I am no longer myself. I am no longer the normal man I once knew. Every time I enter a room, I feel like someone is watching me, watching my every step. I can't look in the mirror without feeling like something is different. My reflection is always blurry, as if it doesn't fully belong to me. The faint glow from the ceiling lamp only accentuated the sense of something eerie in the room, and I couldn't shake that feeling. It is watching me, making me a part of it. Every night is the same. The lights began to flicker on and off strangely. It wasn't a malfunction, it wasn't an electric current, it was something inexplicable. Every time the lights go out, I feel it coming closer. The shadow, which I couldn't see clearly but could feel in the air, moved through the house. It doesn't require walking. It doesn't need to do anything. It only exists in silence, and it is that silence that scares me. There are times when I wonder if I'm losing my mind. I tried everything to prove to myself that it was all a coincidence, that I was too stressed, that this house was just an old place with cracks and unusual sounds. But then I realized what was worse. Was that shadow my own creation? Are my fears, stress, and panic attacks creating an illusion I can't escape from? One night, I decided to face it. I waited, sitting quietly in the living room, in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights, only the weak moonlight shone in from the window. The strange feeling of sitting in the dark, seeing nothing but silence, made me feel like I was lost in a place with no way out. Everything around me became blurry, as if they were melting in the darkness. I listened, trying to figure out what sounds could explain what I was experiencing. But there was only silence. Then, suddenly, I heard a light step, very light, as if someone was moving from behind me. I turned around, but there was nothing. I couldn't understand. I clearly felt that something was standing right behind me, and I didn't dare turn around to look. My heart beat strongly, blood rushed through my body. I felt cold sweat running down my spine, but I couldn't leave. I can't stand up. I was frozen in fear, unable to breathe. At this point, I just know that I can't live like this forever. I wondered if I was just creating these illusions to cope with my own anxiety. But can I prove that I'm wrong? A moment passed, and I felt like I was falling into a dream. Fatigue, anxiety, and confusion seemed to make me lose control. I don't know how much longer I can endure. As I entered the bedroom, the door closing behind me, I felt a cold wave run through my body. The feeling that there was something waiting for me just out of sight became even clearer. Everything in this room, from the bed to the wardrobe, seemed strange. I couldn't stop looking at that closet, as if I knew that if I looked there, I would see something unbearable. I stood there, unable to move. My eyes moved from one corner to another. I felt that presence, like a shadow, invisible but very clear in my feelings. I know it's there, right behind me. I could feel its breath, as if it were standing near me, just waiting for me to return. Unable to bear it anymore, I ran out, through the hallway, not caring where I went. I just want to escape, but there is no way out. I felt that shadow chasing me. There were no footsteps, no sound, only an indescribable presence. Every time I look back, it's still there, right behind me. I don't know if I can continue to live like this, imprisoned in this fear, or if I will be swallowed by that same shadow. That shadow never leaves me. Every night, when darkness covers the house, I feel it. Maybe I've gotten used to it, but every time it returns, it brings with it a new fear, a rising sense of anxiety that I can't shake. I couldn't talk about it with anyone, because I knew no one would understand. They would consider me paranoid, someone with a mental breakdown. But I know, that shadow is real, and it is always there, waiting for me, in every moment, in every room, in every dark corner that I cannot see. Every night, I convince myself that nothing will happen. I turned off the lights, sat in the dark, tried to breathe deeply and regulate my heart rate. But then, as if irresistibly, I began to feel that presence again, a feeling that I couldn't deny. It came from within this space, right in my room, where I was sitting, where I thought I was safe. But I can't escape it. As the light from the lamp faded, I began to hear strange sounds, unexplainable noises. The rustling sound of something moving near me, then a tiny creaking sound, as if someone was walking right next to me. At first, I thought it was just the sound of objects in the house, old objects changing over time. But every time I turned around, every time I tried to look into the darkness, the feeling became stronger, clearer. That shadow is moving in the room. It doesn't need to walk, it just passes by, as if waiting for me to look at it. One night, I couldn't sit still any longer. I stood up, eyes wide open, looking into the darkness. Everything seemed to lose its sharpness, as if I were lost in a hazy space where everything was blurry and confusing. I walked across the room, and as soon as I passed the closet, I felt it, a cold feeling, a presence clinging to me from behind. I couldn't stop, I couldn't look back, but every step I took seemed to prolong an unbearable tension. I can't bear it anymore. I rushed out, ran into the hallway, and opened the window. The night air was cool, but it couldn't dispel the heat inside me. I feel like I'm surrounded by something invisible. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I felt that shadow, the shadow that had chased me through every corner of the house, still standing there, out of my sight. The following nights, I couldn't sleep anymore. I began to hear small laughter, indistinct whispers, as if someone was whispering in my ear. I tried to listen, but when I tried to understand it, everything became eerily silent. That feeling came back again, making me unable to feel at peace. Every time I think I've gotten rid of it, it comes back stronger. There were times when I thought I couldn't go on anymore. Feeling tired and exhausted made me lose my sanity. Everything around me seemed distorted. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My hair was messy, my eyes were dark from lack of sleep, and the dim light reflecting from the mirror made me feel like I was lost in another space, not the one I used to live in. I wanted to run away, but there was nowhere to go. One night, when I no longer had the strength to continue fighting, I decided to find a way to solve this problem. I went to the library, looking for any documents that could explain this strange phenomenon. Books about supernatural events, haunting signs, ghost stories that I have seen in my dreams. But the more I researched, the more I felt drawn into inexplicable mysteries. The words on the page seemed to be jumbled up in my eyes. I can't understand them anymore. When I returned to the house, that shadow appeared again, as if it knew I would return. I stood in the living room, looking at the wardrobe that I didn't dare to look at before, didn't dare to approach. At this point, I feel like I have no choice but to face it. I opened the closet door, and inside, a cold breeze blew out, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I can't move. I knew that something was hiding there, that shadow, that I had felt before, was waiting for me, standing right in the darkness. Suddenly, in that quiet moment, I heard a whisper. Not from somewhere far away, but from right inside me. This feeling, I have never forgotten. It was my own voice, the voice in my head, but not from me. It was like something had taken over my mind. And in that moment, I could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was an illusion. I can't escape that shadow. It took over me. And I'm not myself anymore. With each passing night, my panic increased. That shadow, a shadow I couldn't see, but felt clearly, seemed to be pulling me into an invisible abyss, from which there was no escape. Every step, every movement in this house, I feel like invisible eyes are watching me, not from a faraway place, but from within my own body. I can't sleep anymore. Every night, I lie awake, my eyes wide open in the darkness, waiting for something to happen. But that something was the feeling of being surrounded by an invisible force, a presence that was getting closer and closer. I knew I couldn't escape it, that I was being pushed into a state I couldn't control anymore. I heard noises from all over the house, whispers, footsteps, but couldn't determine where. Every time I tried to look into the darkness, I saw only a blur, a void filled with threats that I couldn't face. My eyes began to blur, my body became numb from fatigue. A feeling of fear filled my chest, like something was slowly suffocating me. Each panic attack was like a violent wave, pounding my body endlessly, making it impossible for me to breathe. I didn't know how much longer I could go on. I didn't know if I could still maintain my sanity. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I went outside, out of the house, out of this place that had covered me with obsession. I walked through the vast fields, not knowing where I was going, just to find a place where I could feel safe. But no matter how far I ran, that shadow was still there, watching me from afar. That feeling couldn't be stopped, it followed me like an invisible shadow. There was nothing but absolute silence, no sound, only an invisible presence covering everything. And then, in that moment, I heard footsteps. Gently but clearly. It came from behind me. I turned around, but there was no one. There was no one behind me, no one anywhere. But that feeling, I can feel it more clearly than ever. Something was there, standing just out of my sight, watching me, waiting for me to see it. I felt my limbs shaking, my steps were no longer steady. The feeling of that shadow, that presence, spread into my mind. I can't escape it, I can't shake it. With each passing moment, I felt like I was being pulled into a horrifying dream, where I couldn't distinguish what was real and what was an illusion. That shadow is here, right in my mind, it doesn't need a form. It doesn't require any steps. It exists only in my fear, in the moments when I cannot escape myself. That shadow has begun to permeate everything. The whole house, this whole space, is covered by terrifying silence. The walls are no longer walls. The objects in the room are no longer just objects. They are like lifeless objects, just faint images in the existence of that shadow. Another night, I sat in the living room, where the light from a dim lamp shone on the wall. That shadow appeared again, this time clearer than ever. But it was not a mere shadow. It has the shape, not of a person, but of something else. Something invisible, indescribable, but very clear in my feelings. It stood right next to me, there, in the dark, but I didn't dare look at it. I know, if I did that, I wouldn't be myself anymore. Uncontrollable fear took hold of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. That shadow, that invisible presence, was not only outside me, but was inside me, in every corner of my mind. I'm not me anymore. I don't know if I can survive this night, but I know that I cannot continue to live in this obsession. There's no way to escape. I can't run away from that shadow. And I can't live without it. That shadow has become a part of me, and I can't escape it anymore. With each passing night, my sense of fear increased. That shadow, which I cannot identify, is always present in dark corners, always exists right behind me, whether I look or not. Sometimes, when I walk through the hallway, I can feel that look, that silent, yet very clear look, as if it were always waiting for me, ready to sneak into my space again. That feeling is more than just tension in the body. It was a presence, something still, invisible but very clear. Tonight, as I move through the living room, I feel it more strongly than ever. The light on the ceiling flickered again, not because of a malfunction but for an inexplicable reason. I looked into the room, looked at the cupboard and the dark corner near the balcony, a place I usually didn't dare to look at for long. It was a dark area, where I felt that shadow might be hiding, where I didn't dare to face it. Even though the faint light of the dim lamp tried to illuminate the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, right behind me, in this room. Furthermore, the opposite wall did not help me feel secure. I felt as if something dark was lurking behind the wallpaper, stretching and filling the space like an invisible force. Something inside me started screaming for me to leave, but I couldn't. I can't leave this house, because I feel, deep in my mind, that if I leave, that shadow will follow me. Not just in this house, but in my life. It will chase me, it will cling to me, and it will never leave me alone. I stood up, my hands trembling as I grabbed my coat and threw it over my shoulders, my cold fingers sliding over the keys, an automatic, thoughtless movement, just to leave this room. But when I walked out of the room, that shadow appeared again. It doesn't require walking. It doesn't need to do anything. It just existed, standing there, in the dark. I felt like I was trapped, between the empty room and the inability to escape that shadow. My heart beat violently, I felt like my body was being squeezed by an invisible force. I looked back into the hallway, where the living room's light gradually flickered. For a moment, I thought I saw a shape, a shadow, standing near the closet. It was something vague, visible only for a fleeting moment, but enough to leave me unable to breathe. Fear shot up inside me. I couldn't move, just stood there, my hands shaking holding the phone. That shadow, something that was here, was watching me, always there, waiting for me to look at it. I know, if I look at that one more time, nothing good will happen. But I couldn't stop looking. I couldn't resist that urge. Suddenly, the elevator light upstairs started flashing rapidly, as if it was trying to warn me, to remind me that something was wrong. I felt a suffocation in my chest, as if a metal ring was tightening around my heart. Unable to stop, I pushed the door open and stepped into the elevator. The door closed behind me, but I knew that no matter where I went, that shadow would still follow me. I haven't looked back. I didn't look back at that house, but it felt like it was still there, still chasing me, still following me, never letting go, never leaving me. As I drove out of the neighborhood, the feeling of fear still did not let me go. I told myself that I was doing the right thing, that I had escaped it, but part of me knew that the shadow wouldn't stop. It won't stop until I'm no longer myself. That shadow has stuck with me, it has become a part of me. I cannot explain what happened. I cannot deny that I have tried to escape from unexplainable things. But that shadow still haunts me. And in the quiet hours, before dawn, I wondered what had followed me out of that apartment. Was that shadow truly limited within the walls of that house, or had it latched onto my mind, continuing to haunt me from the inside? Every time I look in the mirror, I no longer see myself. There was only silence, and that shadow, hovering beside me, waiting for the moment to enter my mind again. I thought I could get away with it. I convinced myself that I just needed to be more resilient, I just needed to face this fear one more time, and then it would all pass. But as soon as I got back to the apartment, that stormy night, I realized I was wrong. The weak light from the lamp in the living room flickered strangely. Suddenly, like a cruel joke of fate, a flash of lightning illuminated the room for a brief moment. Its dazzling light made everything in the room clearly visible. And then I saw that shadow, standing near the window curtain, just a few steps away from me. More than just a shadowy figure, this time I could see the outlines of a motionless body, as if someone was standing there, waiting for me to return. I felt my heart skip a beat, as if it was being hit hard in my chest. In that one moment, I heard a faint gurgling sound, as if someone was breathing right next to me, so close, as if I could touch it. The feeling of suffocation was so extreme that I had to rush to find the light switch. But when the light came on, the room returned to absolute silence, and that shadow was no longer there. Nothing. There is only empty space, no trace left behind. I stood there, in the middle of the dark living room, my heart still pounding in my chest. The lights suddenly turned on, thunder roared through the wall, but the cold feeling still remained. That light, no matter how strong, cannot dispel that shadow. That shadow is still there, still lurking somewhere in my mind. This space, this apartment, has become a trap that imprisons me. The tension continued to increase. That shadow is not only present in the dark. Every time I enter the living room, even when the lights are on, I still feel something heavy, as if it were somewhere in the room, in that very space. Every time I looked in the mirror, my reflection seemed distorted, as if someone was standing behind me, peering over my shoulder, but when I turned around, there was no one. And then, late one night, when I returned from a late meeting, as I stepped out of the elevator, I felt something was wrong again. The hallway lights were still flashing, my footsteps echoed in the quiet space, but they weren't normal footsteps. My feeling was that something was following me, hovering in the air, even though I was alone. I heard a hoarse sound behind me, like a whisper. I turned around, but the hallway was still empty. I stood there, feeling the space around me seem to sag, as if the air had become thicker, heavier. The key slipped from my hand, fell to the floor, and its echo in the silence was like a scream in the middle of the night. This panic cannot be stopped. I felt like I was surrounded, as if that shadow had begun to infiltrate every part of my life. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything other than how to get rid of this feeling. I quickly picked up the key, my hands shaking uncontrollably. When I entered my apartment, I couldn't stop looking at the balcony. The feeling that something was still standing there, staring at me, unable to escape. I forced myself to look at the window curtain, opening it a little. The light from outside the city reflected through the glass, a dim light in the night, but there was no one. Nothing, except silence. But this feeling, the feeling that something was still there, lurking, never going away, always hovering around me, couldn't be dismissed. The next morning, my coworkers started noticing my fatigue again. Frequent questions about my health and life at home made me feel even heavier. I couldn't tell them that I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't escape from. That shadow still clings to me, watching me every second, every minute. No longer able to pretend, I wondered, could that shadow really follow me outside my apartment? That feeling followed me into the street, into the store, into the elevator, wherever I went. Everywhere I go, I feel it, like an invisible black hole threatening to swallow me whole. One night, as I was walking into the apartment after a long day, I heard whispering again. This time, it's clearer than ever. Not just a vague sound, but the whisper of a voice, very close, right behind me. I turned around, but it was still just me in the empty hallway. Yet that feeling, that presence, remains. Still haunting me, still clinging to me as if inseparable. And I know, I can no longer live in this house. That shadow will never leave me, not in this house, not in my life. Every moment that passed, I felt that there was no way out. That shadow, or rather, the invisible presence, took over me, controlling my every thought and every step. Every night, I feel it getting stronger and stronger, like an invisible creature is waiting for me, watching me, every breath, every move. I cannot escape it. That shadow not only haunted me in the space of the apartment but also in every corner of my mind. I couldn't sleep for many nights. The nightmare continued long and thick, mixed with reality, making it impossible for me to distinguish between dreams and reality. Every time I wake up, I find myself drenched in sweat, panting like I just ran a long distance. The strange images from last night were still haunting, as if they had just happened. Every silhouette on the wall has the appearance of a person, every reflection in the window seems to have a life of its own. These thoughts confused me to the point of wondering if I was having a psychological breakdown, or if the shadow was actually something supernatural and unexplainable. On a particularly stormy evening, when I returned home from a meeting, I intentionally left late. In my heart, a small hope that fatigue and darkness would force that shadow to reveal itself, so that I could face it. I decided I wouldn't run away anymore, I wouldn't try to ignore it. Even if I have to step into a dark room, no matter how much fear I have to face it. Yet, when I opened the apartment door, a flash of lightning illuminated the room in a blinding light. That shadow appeared again. Not a faint silhouette, but an unmistakable outline, shoulders and a head standing motionless, almost pressed against the curtains. The feeling of suffocation immediately enveloped me, my heart skipped a beat, I couldn't breathe. In that moment, I thought I heard a faint, gurgling sound, as if someone was breathing softly, close to me. I hurriedly looked for the light switch. Another bolt of lightning flashed through the window, sounding like a monster's roar. But when the light returned, everything was calm again. Nothing. There is only empty space. The feeling of that presence, although invisible, still haunted me. That shadow, even though it was gone, was still there in my mind, as if it had been lingering the whole time. All night, I couldn't sleep. There's always something strange about my reflection in the glass door. The shadows stretched and distorted as if stretched by an invisible force. Sometimes, I thought I saw a small vibration on the glass surface, even though there was no wind. It was a strange vibration, like something was moving behind the glass, an invisible shadow that I couldn't see, but felt clearly. I tried to explain everything. This apartment, this building may be too old, factors such as dim lighting or strange reflections may create illusions. But every time I tried to rationalize, I felt an inescapable fear. The following nights, I began to hear the sound of tiny footsteps coming from the balcony door, as if someone was moving gently in the darkness. My heart was pounding, so much so that it was as if I could hear the pounding in my ears. I couldn't keep calm anymore. Things were changing, not just in the apartment but also within myself. The feeling of being watched not only happens at home but also lasts throughout the day. I feel like there is a shadow always watching me, every step I take, every place I go. Every time I go out, into the store or when I enter the office, I feel it is still there, watching me from afar. One morning, when a colleague asked me about my health, I just smiled wryly, trying to hide the anxiety rising in my heart. But I feel they are suspicious. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, is overwhelming me every day. While everyone around me could continue with their normal lives, I couldn't escape this feeling, as if I was trapped in an endless nightmare. Finally, I decided that I had to leave this apartment, no matter how difficult it might be. But every time I think about moving, the feeling gets stronger. That shadow didn't want me to leave. It had clung to me for so long, and as I took each step out of the apartment, it felt like the house itself was resisting my departure. An invisible force is trying to pull me back. And on my last night there, I stood in front of the balcony door, looking at my reflection in the glass. I feel like I'm not me anymore. My reflection looked like that of a stranger. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mouth was dry, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stayed another night, something terrible would happen. Something will make it impossible for me to escape that shadow again. But then, morning finally came. Pale light filtered through the window curtains. The tension eased a bit, and I took advantage of that time to pack up my things, carrying each box down to the elevator in the hallway. Every trip is like a small victory. Each box is a tangible step toward freedom. Even though the hallway still had cold breezes gently passing along the walls, I was determined not to turn back. Just before closing the door for the last time, I stood on the balcony. The morning sunlight sparkled on the glass, revealing an empty and silent space. But I couldn't shake the feeling that, behind that glass, something was staring at me, quietly, patiently. My heart was pounding. Sweat beaded on his temples. The surge of fear served as a final reminder of all I had experienced in that 8th-floor apartment. I put the key back on the kitchen counter. And walk away. The light from the hallway flickered as the elevator opened, making my uneasiness increase even more. But I took a deep breath, feeling the knot in my chest gradually disappear. Finally, I left. But a question lingered in my mind. Was that shadow left behind in that empty apartment, or was it attached to me, following me to my new home? Even now, in my new apartment, I sometimes catch myself peeking out the balcony door from the corner of my eye. The pulse speeds up for no reason. I couldn't stop myself from imagining, one day, when I returned home after work, exhausted and listless, I would see it, that dark figure, leaning against the glass, silent, waiting. And if that day comes, do I have enough courage to face it again? Or will I lose the last remaining piece in my mind? I don't have the answer. There was only a dull fear, like a shadow still lurking at the edge of vision, never completely disappearing. It's the kind of obsession that leaves scars on the soul. An unanswered question, what really lurks in the world's darkest corners, or in our own minds? And even though I told myself it was over, I couldn't shake the belief that, if I turned around and opened that apartment door one more time, I would see it, that shadow, imprinted on the glass. Wait for my return. I still clearly remember the cold, metallic smell of fear the first night I saw it. And recently, in a seemingly harmless moment, I stepped into the elevator after a long day at work. The body is tired and exhausted. The mind floats in a haze of sleep and residual adrenaline. I looked up, looked into the polished steel mirror in front of me, and realized I was not alone. Behind me is a man. Tall. Too silent. Not a single expression. Not a single movement. For a moment, less than a second, I had to blink. The elevator door closed. My heart was pounding. I couldn't say anything, because there was something about him, a heavy silence that made me know, don't speak up. When I reached my floor, I turned around, ready to face, but the elevator was completely empty. It's just me. And the creepy feeling that figure, had disappeared into thin air. I stood silently in front of the new apartment door, the key shaking in my hand. Inside, everything was intact, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I walked in, the faint light from the hallway poured in, creating strange shadows on the wall. I headed to the balcony, where I once felt safe. But this time, the reflection on the glass stunned me. A shadowy shadow, shapeless, but terrifyingly familiar, was standing behind me. I turned around, but there was no one. My heart was pounding, cold sweat broke out. I told myself that it was just a hallucination, the result of sleepless nights and prolonged stress. But deep in my mind, I know that shadow has never left. The following days, I tried to live normally. But every night, the feeling of being watched becomes stronger. I heard strange noises, indistinct whispers. I felt invisible eyes following my every move. One night, as I was lying in bed, I felt a rush of cold air. I opened my eyes, and saw that shadow standing at the end of the bed, motionless, faceless. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only stare at it, until I fainted from fear. When I woke up, it was morning. The room was empty, with no sign of any other presence. But I know, that shadow is still there, waiting in the dark. I decided to leave the new apartment, hoping that a change of environment would help me escape my obsession. But no matter where I go, that shadow still follows me. It is no longer part of the old apartment, but has become a part of me. I don't know if I can get away with it. I just know that every time I look in the mirror, I see it standing behind me, silent and waiting. That presence constantly follows me, like an invisible ghost, invisible but always present, always waiting. The feeling that someone, or something, was watching me every moment of my life, made it impossible for me to feel at peace. And I know, it's not because of anxiety or the stress of work, but because something is really hurting me, haunting me. That stormy night was the turning point. I thought I could deal with it, but now, I'm not so sure. I decided that if that shadow really existed, I had to face it. Face it not by avoiding it or trying to explain it, but by discovering it yourself, facing it yourself in the darkest. That night, after a long and tiring day, I came home late, deliberately delaying it, hoping that the fatigue would make me braver and help me overcome my fear. When I entered the apartment, there was nothing but darkness. This feeling rose within me again. Everything became strangely still, and the air was oppressive as if everything was waiting. I turned off the overhead light and stood facing the balcony glass, looking at my own reflection in it. The faint light from the city reflected on the glass, as if invisible ghosts were dancing around me. My heart was pounding, sweat was pouring down my temples, my throat was tight. Everything seems to become blurry. And then, I saw something I couldn't forget, that shadow, still standing there, in the reflection, right next to me, but it wasn't me. That shadow, the shadow I had been afraid of all this time, was standing so close to me, that I could feel its cold breath, but no warmth. The silence in the room became thick, as if the air had been stripped of oxygen. I wanted to turn around, turn on the light, but my body couldn't move. My heart was beating fast, so fast that I felt like something in my chest was breaking. Every second that passes is a punch to my nerves. The reflection in the glass seemed distorted, as if an invisible force was pulling everything out of its normal shape. A cold wave rose from my back, and the figure seemed to lean towards me. This time, I can't pretend anymore. It's not an illusion. I saw it, could feel it, as if it was waiting for me, about to step out of the glass wall and into my life. I turned back to the faint light from the ceiling lamp, my hands shaking as if I had no strength left. Finally, in utter desperation, I turned on the light, lighting up the room in a blinding light. And like magic, that shadow disappeared. Only silence remains. But that feeling never disappeared. It's still there, haunting me, still surrounding me every moment. I can feel it, no matter what I do. The next day, I started doing what I could to escape this house. I searched for a way to get out of the lease, but all efforts seemed to be in vain. The feeling of being stuck in this space, unable to escape, has become too heavy. That shadow not only haunted me in the apartment, but it had begun to infiltrate my mind. Every step I take, every place I go, it feels like I can't escape it. With nothing else to do, I felt increasingly pushed into a dead end. That shadow has become a part of my life. Every time I walked through the hallway, every time I entered the room, I felt like something was hovering around me. That shadow was not only in the apartment, but followed me, eating away at my mind little by little. On my last night in that apartment, I couldn't take it anymore. I know I can't stay here. When I look in the mirror, my reflection is no longer mine. My eyes were tired, I didn't change on the outside, but inside, I felt like I had died a long time ago. I was no longer myself. That shadow, that obsession, swallowed me completely. I can't forget that night, the last night I spent in that apartment. The shadow constantly haunts me. Even though I tried my best to leave, to find a solution, when I faced it, I felt an invisible force pulling me back. It is a vicious cycle that cannot be escaped. That shadow has become a part of me, like an inseparable obsession. The last night I returned to the apartment, I felt that I was facing a big decision, an irrevocable choice. Even though I know I can't stay, I don't know where the safe place is. The shadow followed me in every step, in every breath. Every room, every hallway, even in my sleep, there is that presence, watching me, waiting for me. I felt like there was nothing left but fear, like this very apartment was swallowing me up little by little. That evening, when I entered the living room, I felt a strange coldness. Everything was unbearably quiet. There were no footsteps, no wind. There was only silence and the feeling of being enveloped by an invisible shadow. I looked in the mirror on the balcony door, trying to look straight at myself, but I couldn't. My reflection in the mirror was no longer me. My eyes were empty, lifeless, only obsession remained in my gaze. Suddenly, I heard a slight creak. I turned around, feeling my body stiffen, unable to move. That shadow appeared again, blurry and unidentifiable. This time, it did not stand still but moved along the wall, making no sound, just passing by like an invisible shadow. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My voice was stuck in my throat, as if some force was stopping me. That feeling, the feeling of being watched from all sides, became worse. With each passing minute, that shadow grew stronger. I began to feel like it didn't just exist in this house, but clung to me, to my every thought. It had infiltrated my mind, not just in the darkness but in every waking moment. That shadow was not a physical thing, but a feeling, a presence within myself. It has become an inseparable part of me, and I cannot live without it. Every time I leave home, I feel like it's still following me. Yes, it's following me. It's in the streets I walk through, in the places I visit. That shadow doesn't need to be present, but I feel it in everything, in the air, in my suffocating feeling. No place is safe. It was here, inside me. I started to doubt myself. Am I really haunted by an invisible shadow? Or is it all just a product of fatigue, stress, and loneliness in this world? But every time I sit in the dark, I feel that shadow again. It's not just my paranoia. It's real. And it always waits for me. Every night, I have to face it, have to live in that fear. I no longer feel safe in my own home. That shadow took over my entire space. I can't continue living like this, but I don't know how to get out either. I started to feel like I was in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I tried to get rid of that feeling, but it became more and more impossible. That night, after finally closing the door to my old apartment behind me, I thought I was free from everything. The morning light gently shines through the window, no longer dark and dense like before. But that feeling still did not let me go, like a shadow, quietly following my every step. Even though I left, even though I entered a new home, the feeling of being watched constantly followed me. In the evenings when I return home after a stressful day of work, there are no more dim balcony doors, no more scary flickering lights, but the silence in the new space makes me feel frustrated. I tried to rationalize everything, telling myself it was just stress, a gradual buildup of fatigue, but there was no denying the feeling that something wasn't right. I stood there, looking at the reflections in the window, unable to shake the feeling that someone was standing near me. Sometimes, I catch that look from myself, a look not from me, but from some shadowy figure, always present, always hovering just outside my sight. One evening, I came home tired after a long day. As I stepped out of the elevator, I heard a small whisper, indistinct, but enough to give me goosebumps. The sound was very light, but sharp, making me feel like someone was standing right behind me. I turned around, but there was only an empty hallway. The flickering light in the hallway made me feel the tension in the air even heavier. That feeling is undeniable, the shadow is still here, I know it. The feeling of insecurity continued to increase, it seemed like I couldn't escape that shadow. Every step I take in this new apartment makes me feel like someone is watching me. I looked into the mirror in the living room, but this time, it wasn't my reflection I saw. Something else, a shadowy figure, like I was looking at a living figure, but it wasn't me. A silence surrounded me, making me unable to move, unable to leave. When I stepped out onto the balcony, the light from the city reflected through the glass, I felt that shadow somewhere, hidden in the reflection. My heart beat so fast that I felt scared. I wonder if I can live in this house without being haunted by it, or is that shadow attached to me and will follow me for the rest of my life? One particular evening, I decided to face it, even though I no longer had the strength to fight. I stood in the room, turned off all the lights, leaving only the light from the window shining in. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, trying not to let fear overwhelm me. But then, again, I see it. A pale figure stood right behind me, so close that I could feel cold breath on the back of my neck. Everything inside me was shaking, uncontrollable, as if an invisible force was pushing me into a state I couldn't escape from. I turned around immediately, but there was no one. There was only darkness, only thick silence, covering everything. That shadow, that image, seemed to have taken over every space in the room. I can't stop, I can't get out. Part of me knows that if I can't face it, I will forever live in this fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little noise, every shadowy figure in the dark corner, woke me up. The shadow is not just a phenomenon. It has become a part of my life, something that has clung to me and is inseparable. I don't know how much longer I can endure, but I also can't leave it, because I clearly feel that if I try to leave, it will continue to follow me, and one day, it will not just stop in the darkness anymore. Last night, I couldn't sleep. That shadow, a shadow that I had never seen clearly, but felt very clearly, still followed me like an inescapable nightmare. The memory of that figure, standing tall and silent behind me, is indelible. Although I tried to convince myself that it was just fatigue and stress from work and life, no explanation could dispel the fear that was attacking me. The feeling of that presence still cannot leave me. Last night, every time I closed my eyes, I was startled awake, wondering if that shadow was still standing there, hidden in the dark corner of the room, waiting. I began to fear that I would never find peace again, that shadow had attached itself to me, following me into my new life. The dark corners, no matter how small, became places where I felt surrounded, as if that shadow was still there. The next morning, I tried to find a reasonable explanation. I stopped in front of the elevator, my hand hovering over the call button. Part of me wanted to just take the stairs to avoid feeling scared, but I felt too tired. Even so, I still pushed the elevator door open and stepped in. My eyes scanned every corner of the cabin, but there was nothing. The elevator was empty. I looked at the numbers ticking down, heard the engine creak, the cable hiss in the quiet space. But there was nothing else, no sign of that shadow. I walked out, the feeling of being watched still persisted. That shadow doesn't have to be present for me to feel it. It still follows me in every step, in every space I go through. Even though I tried to convince myself that it was just stress, I knew that shadow was still there, in the back of my mind. It was not a physical presence, but a feeling that was difficult to explain. At lunch, I told a colleague about the experience, but I downplayed its horror. I'm just saying that I might have been mistaken, or it might have been a stress-induced hallucination. My colleagues shrugged, not too surprised, as if they had heard too many similar stories. They told me I needed a long weekend to relax. But the relief I tried to create did little to reassure me. When I get home at the end of the day, I can't help but feel nervous. The feeling of being watched from behind is still like a blur, and I can't explain why. That shadow not only haunted me in the dark but was deeply ingrained in my life. I even started to get scared as I walked through the hallways of the building, staring at the flickering fluorescent lights, feeling the space becoming increasingly dim and threatening. I decided to ask the security guard if there was a recording of anyone entering the elevator with me the night before. When the guard played the video again, I looked at the screen, hoping that I would find a reasonable explanation. But when the video played, I only saw myself entering the elevator, tiredly pressing the button for my floor, then the door closed, and there was no one else. There was no figure standing behind me, no one entering the elevator with me. I felt a numb feeling, as if I had just had a nightmare. My reason began to crumble. The video doesn't lie, but why do I feel like there's someone with me in the elevator? As I left the security booth, I tried to make sense of everything, but the more I tried, the more I felt like I was sinking into a coma. That shadow still follows me, is still a part of my life, no matter where I go or what I do. I wondered if I was haunted by my own fears, or if that shadow really existed. But no matter what, I can't escape that feeling. In the following days, I continued to live with this tension. That shadow doesn't appear clearly anymore, but I always feel its presence, always feel like it's watching me every second. I can no longer distinguish between reality and fantasy, between what I want to believe and what I fear. Every night, when I come home, that feeling returns, silently, quietly, but always present. That shadow was deeply ingrained in my mind, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. My legs were shaking as I stepped out of the elevator. It felt like all the strength in my body had disappeared. Even though I had arrived home, the atmosphere still weighed heavily on me. The feeling of fear rose, my heart pounded loudly in my chest, not because of fatigue after a long day, but because of the feeling that was clinging to me from the elevator. That night, I knew I couldn't explain anymore. I just felt that presence, undeniable, impossible to ignore. The silhouettes and blurs that I saw in the mirror could not have been just imagination. I started to doubt myself. Have I gone too far in constructing these stories in my head, or does that shadow really exist? Every time I entered the apartment, the space became stuffy. Every time I looked in the mirror, my image was distorted, and my eyes seemed to be seeing something I couldn't understand. I walked into the living room, opened the coat closet, tried to calm my breathing, but that feeling still didn't leave me. Only when I plopped down on the chair and looked at the empty space in the room did I realize that I hadn't completely escaped that shadow. The strange silhouettes and blurs I saw kept coming back to my mind, as if they were waiting for me somewhere in the dark. Day by day, I began to change my habits, trying to get used to living with that anxiety, but it got worse and worse. Every time I come home, I feel like someone is watching me. The apartment door creaked as if someone was standing outside, looking in through a peephole. Every little noise in the house startled me. It felt like the space around me was shrinking, as if it was reacting to that invisible presence. My mind fights constantly. I tell myself I'm just tired, that maybe work is too stressful, or maybe the lack of sleep is making me perceive things in a distorted way. But every time I try to explain, the feeling gets stronger. Every time I looked in the mirror, that shadow flashed in the weak light of the lamp. The reflections distorted, as if someone was standing nearby, a tall, silent, unmoving figure. That night, I decided that I had to face it, even though I had no strength left. I returned later than usual, when the building's hallway was in darkness. Half of the lights in the building were turned off due to maintenance, and the space became darker and heavier than ever. I walked to the elevator, and when the doors opened, I noticed that the light inside was only enough to illuminate a small part of the space. A cold, stuffy feeling enveloped me when I entered. As the elevator moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a presence behind me. Part of me wanted to turn back, but something held me back, making it impossible. As I looked up at the reflection in the elevator door, I noticed a smudge in the back corner, an opaque silhouette, too tall and too hard to be just a smudge. My whole body felt like it was frozen. I tried not to turn around, but I couldn't stop feeling that presence. When the light from the ceiling lamp shined, I saw his eyes, two deep, black holes, as if they were stabbing straight at me, piercing flesh and bone. I felt as if that gaze was invading my mind, engulfing me in indescribable fear. All my senses responded, but my body couldn't move. The feeling of suffocation made me almost unable to breathe. I had to stay calm, I told myself, but that look, that shadow, took hold of me. When the elevator stopped, I didn't dare look back. The door opened, and I walked out, hastily leaving. But the silence is still there, the shadow still follows me. It didn't stop there, there was no sign of it leaving me. When I got home, I didn't dare look in the mirror, didn't dare look at the reflections. Every time I look into those shadows, I feel it standing behind me, waiting. I can't escape this feeling. No matter how much I go out, no matter what I do, I cannot dispel that presence. And now, I wonder if I'm being haunted, or if that shadow really exists. No matter what, I can't escape it, and I don't know if I have the strength to continue living with this fear. I felt like I was entering an endless nightmare. Every day, every hour, I have to face that inexplicable presence. The shadow constantly followed me, not only in the apartment, but also in ordinary moments, making it impossible for me to escape. I could no longer distinguish between reality and the obsessions of my mind. One hazy morning, after a conversation with my therapist, I decided to face what I was going through. I walked into the hallway and tried to stay away from the elevator. But as I took the stairs, I heard light footsteps behind me. That feeling, the feeling of being watched, returned again, as if that shadow was following me, clinging to my every step. At that moment, I stopped, trying to find my composure. Sweat trickled down my spine, my heart beat rapidly in my chest. The footsteps behind me did not stop, just slowly and steadily like a shadow following me. I turned around, but saw nothing but empty stairs, no trace of anyone standing behind me. I took a deep breath, telling myself that it was just my imagination. But then the following nights, anxiety spiked again. I can't escape that feeling, no matter what I do. Every time I pass a reflective surface, I can't help but check. Those silhouettes, those shadowy figures standing behind me, are sometimes just fleeting in the corner of my eye. But every time I turned around, it disappeared before I could see clearly. And no matter how hard I try to explain it, that feeling doesn't lessen. It became even stronger, as if an invisible presence was waiting for me. One night, as I was standing in the hallway, scanning the corners with my key, I noticed a notice posted on the wall. It's an elevator maintenance notice. It seemed like someone had complained about the flashing lights and the elevator stopping suddenly. My chest tightened at the thought of having to step into an elevator that could stop at any moment or worse, plunge into darkness. And then I decided, no matter how scared I was, I had to get on the elevator. I took a deep breath, grabbed the elevator call button, and felt every muscle in my body tense. When the elevator door opened, the space inside was harshly lit by fluorescent lights. No flashing lights, no shading, all is clear. The feeling of tension doesn't stop. I stepped into the elevator, feeling like every light in the room was shining directly on me. I stared at the metal doors as they closed, a heavy thud echoing in the stillness. My heart was pounding, not only from the tension but also from the feeling that something was behind me. I don't dare go back. That shadow, the figure I had seen, appeared again. Suddenly, I felt a subtle change in the air. A light, fleeting breeze passed behind me. I didn't dare turn around, but in the reflected light, I began to see that figure appear again. From a small blur, it gradually grew, forming a tall, familiar, and very close figure. My heart was beating so fast that I couldn't hear anything but the pounding in my ears. Its eyes, two bottomless black holes, looked straight at me, through me, making me feel like I was being torn apart. My body was stiff, unable to move. I didn't dare turn around, didn't dare face that shadow. I just looked at my reflection, trying not to let my mind slide into despair. But that shadow was still there, still waiting for me, still making me feel like a prey being hunted in this very room. The elevator continued to go up, but the space inside seemed to be shrinking. Every minute that passes is a long minute. I can't escape, I can't hide. The feeling of being watched, the feeling of insecurity, made me want to scream, but my throat was tight. When the elevator finally reached my floor, the doors opened and I rushed out, feeling liberated, but I knew that wasn't the end. The shadow is still there, always waiting, always following me. When the elevator shook violently and stopped suddenly, I felt a wave of panic spread throughout my body. The light faded, leaving only a weak glow from the emergency lights, making everything in the cabin dark and stuffy. I stood there, my trembling fingers pressing the alarm button, but only heard the hissing sound of static electricity. Everything around me seemed frozen, and I couldn't get out. That feeling, that shadow, is still there. Even though I couldn't see it, I felt its presence. The unforgettable look in the reflection, that shadow did not move, remained still, watching me. I can't leave, I can't run away. That shadow kept waiting, and I couldn't understand why. But then, the elevator started moving again. It lifted, not because I felt it was saving me but because I was pushed to the limit. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped out into the hallway, my legs shaking. Every muscle in my body was still tense, but I didn't dare look back. That shadow still follows me, but I can't clearly determine whether it really exists or not. From that day on, things got worse. Every time I ride an elevator, every time I look at a reflective surface, I feel that shadow standing behind me. The feeling of being watched never goes away, and there's nothing I can do to get rid of it. Faint footsteps echoed in the hallway at night, as if someone was following me. Every time I turned around, I found my apartment empty, without anyone, but the tension still hung in the air. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I took the flashlight and my phone, preparing to enter an unused room where I felt that shadow was hiding. A cold feeling enveloped me as I opened the door. A dark space appeared before my eyes, nothing but empty walls and a large freezer dimmed under the weak light of the flashlight. I walked in, my heart pounding, not because I was afraid of that space but because I was afraid of something lurking in the darkness. I felt a very strange feeling as I approached the freezer, as if someone was nearby, waiting. Every step I took echoed on the tile floor, creating a hollow noise that startled me. I kept checking around, but nothing was obvious. The shadow still did not appear, but the feeling of being watched became stronger and stronger. I turned around, not daring to look into the dark space behind me. But as soon as I stepped out, I heard a small noise, as if someone was moving in the dark. A shiver came over me as I realized that I was not alone. Something, an invisible presence, was following me, following my every step. I don't know if I've actually found that shadow or not, but that presence hasn't left me. Every night, every moment I'm alone in this apartment, I feel like there's something waiting for me to step out into the light. That shadow, I may never actually see, but it is always there, behind me, like an obsession that cannot be shaken off. That night, my resolve was forged into an unshakable decision. I cannot let fear and illusions control me anymore. The strange sounds and shadowy figures were enough to make me doubt my own sanity, but I couldn't ignore that uncomfortable feeling, the feeling that someone, or something, was always watching me in the dark. Without hesitation, I took the flashlight and decided to face this obsession again. My footsteps echoed in the hallway as I gingerly walked step by step, the weak light of my flashlight illuminating every dark corner. It felt like the space around me was shrinking, every step I took echoed, reflected in the empty wall. I'm used to this noise, but today it sounds different. These sounds are not from ordinary objects. It was slow movement, the shivers seemed to come from something invisible, and no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the feeling away. Every step I took made the air heavier, as if something invisible was preventing me from moving forward. I turned my head again, only to see that the hallway was still empty. But that feeling, the feeling of invisible eyes watching me, never went away. As I approached the maintenance area, I noticed the walls there were a bit different, unlike the rest of the hallway. The door to the maintenance area looked discreet and cold, as if it contained something that did not want to be discovered. In that moment, a strange sound rang out. Initially, I couldn't determine its origin. It sounded like a light scratching sound, as if someone was dragging a fingernail through the plastic. I immediately stopped, standing still, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't dare move, but I couldn't resist stepping closer, my flashlight shooting faint light through the dark space. The closer I got, the more I felt a strange change in the air, becoming heavier and heavier. As I approached the corner, I saw it, a shadowy figure, fleeting in the light, bent over as if searching for something. My whole body stiffened, but I couldn't leave. The figure moved quickly, almost imperceptibly, but I was sure I saw it. I panicked, my flashlight began to waver in my hand, the darkness seemed to swallow everything in it. I grabbed for the light, but when I turned around, there was nothing more. All I saw were chairs, standing silently, and the metal freezer I had seen many times. I gasped, feeling like fear had consumed me, but I couldn't give up. The feeling of something invisible, yet close, still covers me. There was no proof that what I was feeling was real, only invisible feelings that were weighing me down. My footsteps echoed in the hallway again as I walked back to my room. At that moment, I knew that I could do nothing but face that shadow, this obsession. But with every step I took, I felt like that shadow was still watching me from behind, something that was always present but never made clear. I couldn't figure out whether I was living in the truth or in my own nightmare. The next day, I went to see the building's head of security, hoping to find a reasonable explanation for what I had experienced. But his answer only made me feel more confused. All he said was that maybe those noises were just echoes from other apartments, from noises outside the building, or because I was too tired, too stressed. But I knew, no matter what he said, what I experienced was real. That shadow, that presence, could not be denied. Even though I tried to explain, whether I believed the logical explanation or not, that shadow still wouldn't let me go. Every night, I feel that presence, watching over me, always lurking somewhere in the darkness. Every time I walk down the hallway I see it, every time I turn to look in the mirror I see it again, and I wonder if I can survive this obsession any longer. Was I starting to lose my sanity? Or is that shadow really waiting for me, always there, in this building, in the dark? I stood still in the hallway, my breath caught in my throat. My eyes were glued to the darkness ahead, not daring to glance to either side. The darkness here is not like the darkness elsewhere. It felt as if it was looking back at me, as if there was something hidden in there, waiting for me to turn my back to enter it. Every step I took brought a feeling of hesitation, as if this space was filled with an invisible life, some creature waiting for me to make a mistake. I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to look, needed to know what was behind the chairs, in the dark corners that I had been ignoring all these days. The flashlight in my hand seemed heavier, and I could feel my heartbeat pounding, echoing in every tense nerve of my body. Every step I took seemed to gnaw away the little courage I had left. I walked slowly, step by step, as if that shadow was watching me, close to me. A light scratching sound sounded from somewhere in the darkness, and I stopped, trying to find its source. The air stopped. I could feel the space gradually narrowing, as if the walls of the hallway were pressing in on me. I can't understand why this feeling is so strong. How could I feel like I was being watched, seen, when I could see nothing but darkness? The light of the flashlight shines on the stacked chairs, like a silent sign of objects that can never move. Suddenly, a flickering shadow appeared in the middle of the chairs, a familiar shape but one that could not be clearly identified. My lips were dry, my hands were shaking, but some force, an invisible force, made me continue to step forward, closer and closer. There was nothing I could do but continue. And then it disappeared. Only the chairs remained, standing silently under the pale light of the flashlight. Once again, I felt deprived of my reason, my body locked in an endless loop of tension and fear. I don't dare to think about what happened, but I can't ignore it. That shadow, that presence, couldn't have been my imagination. That's something beyond my understanding. When I turned around, I felt like I couldn't get out. The long hallway ahead seemed to have no end, as if it was stretching forever into the darkness. I felt fear every time I touched my apartment door, and when I opened it, cold air surrounded me. That feeling, the feeling that I can't relax, that I can't deny, keeps wrapping around me. And when I closed the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that that shadow was still staring at me, from outside the door, from within that empty space. The next day, I tried to continue as usual, working, communicating with friends, but a part of me still couldn't escape this haunting feeling. Reality began to slowly fade away, replaced by uncontrollable thoughts of darkness, of a tall shadow that I couldn't identify. No matter how hard I tried to explain, the fear wouldn't go away. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, though when I looked back, no one was there. Chills ran down my spine every time I touched the reflective surface. Again, I cannot explain this. Have I gone crazy? Or is there really a presence in this building, quietly watching me every night? I don't know, but part of me never wants to know the truth. That shadow, I know that it is still there, in the darkness, waiting for me to enter the inexplicable. And even if I leave here, I feel that it will never leave me. This obsession is inexplicable, but it is so strong that I cannot escape. Day after day, the hallway continued to haunt me, reminding me of the inevitability of fear. It was something that was ingrained in my mind, and it couldn't escape me, no matter how much I tried. Every time I step into it, whether it's day or night, I always feel like invisible eyes are staring at me, following my every step. That presence, though I couldn't clearly identify it, seemed to grow stronger and stronger. Today, when I returned home after a long day, that hallway was waiting for me again. Even though the fluorescent lighting has been replaced by LED lights, the atmosphere in the hallway still retains a cold, stuffy feeling. I tried to convince myself that I was used to its presence, that I was stronger than this fear. But when I entered that hallway, my heart beat so hard it was suffocating. My eyes groped into the dense darkness next to me, then suddenly, a silhouette flickered in the corner of my eye. It wasn't someone, but a silent shadow, moving gently as if it didn't exist in this world. Fear filled me again, and I couldn't escape. I stopped, trying to listen to every sound, but there was only silence. Suddenly, I heard a light scratching sound on the floor, as if someone was moving skillfully. I turned to look, my heart racing, but there was nothing, but stacked chairs and dark storage cabinets. A voice lingered in my head, telling me to keep going, but every step I took felt heavier. As I approached my apartment door, the hallway light flickered and flickered strangely. I stood there, not daring to turn back. Fear enveloped me, like an invisible curtain drawing down. I quickly opened the door and rushed inside, closing the door tightly behind me as if it were a final security point. But there is no peace in my apartment. A feeling of suffocation still clung to me, and the fear did not leave. Strange, inexplicable images and sounds kept repeating in my mind, constantly gnawing at my thoughts. Every night, I feel that presence again. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, even though I knew I was just imagining it. I tried to make sense of everything by looking for logic, looking for a scientific explanation, but all I got was emptiness. I don't know what to do anymore. There were times when I thought I was losing my mind, that I was too stressed and everything was just an illusion. But there's a part of me that can't deny what I've been through. The tracks, the sounds, and the feeling of being watched were all too real to be just a dream. One night, I decided not to let fear control me anymore. I dressed normally, determined to face it again. I walked out and walked down the hallway as a challenge to myself. I didn't look at the walls, I didn't look at the reflections in the glass, I just kept walking. The cold feeling still clung to me, like a ghost that couldn't be shaken off. As I approached the maintenance area, the hallway lights flickered again, giving me the feeling that everything was being destroyed. I stopped, feeling the air around me, then suddenly, a strange noise came from deep in the darkness. Scratching sound, very light, like someone was searching for something on the ground. I bit my lip, not daring to turn back, but each step I took became more and more difficult, as if the space around me was suffocating me little by little. Finally, I stood motionless, closed my eyes, trying to dispel the vague images floating in my mind. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was no longer standing in the familiar hallway. Instead, I was in a large, empty room, with chairs stacked on top of each other. In the corner of the room, a man's figure stood silently, his eyes following me. Every step I took became heavy, as if an invisible force was holding me back. Even though there was no one around, I still felt a quiet presence, watching my every move. I tried calling him, but there was no response. He just continued to stand there, as if I didn't exist. His silence and absence made me even more confused. Every time my eyes met his, a shiver ran down my spine, as if that shadow was clinging to me, not letting go. Then, one night, while I was working late as usual, something unexpected happened. Tonight, as always, I sat at my desk, the light from the desk lamp casting a long shadow on the floor, but there was no familiar noise from behind. There was no sound of his slow footsteps in the hallway. The feeling of suffocation increased. I looked up and realized, not only was he absent, but the entire hallway was silent, no more flashing lights, no more sounds of footsteps going back and forth. In that moment, I felt a change in the air. A strange, heavy silence filled the entire space. My eyes turned back to the window, where the light from the street shone in, but couldn't dispel the cold feeling in the room. I saw a faint silhouette pass behind me in the reflection. Suddenly, a small noise rang out from the hallway, like the squeak of a chair. My heart sank. That wasn't the sound of the chair I just adjusted. It was another noise, like someone was moving behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one. That feeling, that presence still sticks with me. My face was drenched in sweat, my palms were shaking. I couldn't stop looking at the hallway ahead, at its empty space. My eyes searched for any sign of its existence, any silhouette, but there was nothing. However, a creepy feeling rose within me. He is somewhere. I could feel his presence in the air. He's still following me. This feeling makes me more insecure than ever. My whole body tensed up, my heart pounding in my chest. I have to go, I have to get out of here. But as I stood up and walked towards the door, I once again heard footsteps. Softly, from afar, but the sound seemed to penetrate my mind. When I turned around, the door closed tightly. I realized that he was standing right in front of me. His eyes were cold, emotionless, but something made me unable to move, unable to scream. I felt his eyes piercing me, not like a colleague, but like a creature not of this world. He stood there, taller than me, the light from the fluorescent lights reflecting off his unclear face, creating a silhouette that I couldn't reach. And then, before I could do anything, he started moving towards me. Every step he takes is like a slow, steady wave, but with irresistible power. I felt myself being pushed back, step by step, until I could no longer stand. That presence overwhelmed everything I knew about reality. All the things I had tried to explain, all the sounds, all the images, were now just an inexplicable haze. I no longer know where I am, I no longer know what I am doing, all that remains is strange silence, and that black shadow is slowly approaching me. My fear was no longer a normal fear. It had penetrated into my bones, covering my entire body, making me unable to breathe, unable to run away. And then, in that moment, I understood that there was something that could not be changed, something that I could not confront, could not explain. That black shadow was not a person, not a physical shape that could be touched, but something bigger, more haunting, beyond my imagination. I don't know what will happen next, but I understand that I cannot escape it. Even so, all my rational arguments could not dispel that strange feeling. That shadow, the man in the gray suit, didn't look like anyone else in the office. He's not just a part of the vagaries in my mind. No, his presence was so concrete and real that I couldn't ignore it. With each passing day, I began to wonder if his presence was a part of this building, or a part of myself. When I went back to work the next morning, the walls seemed more cramped. Every step in the hallway felt heavier and heavier, as if space had become a trap, forcing me in and watching me every moment. I started to question myself. Am I going crazy? Was that shadow a product of stress, of late and tiring nights at work, or maybe part of something larger, haunting me from a dimension I couldn't understand? These questions kept repeating in my head. Late one evening, while I was working in the office, I noticed a small but obvious difference. The lighting in the room was not the same as usual. Everything seemed brighter, but there was a strange glow, not the glow of familiar fluorescent bulbs. I raised my head and looked towards the opposite window, where there was a dark shadow. And then, I heard light footsteps, not hurried, but clearly someone was approaching. I turned around and saw him, the man in the gray suit, standing in the entrance of the office, right in front of mine. My eyes widened with fear, and my heart beat so hard I thought it might burst in my chest. There was no greeting, no voice, he just stood there, tall and still like a statue. Even though I couldn't see his face clearly, I felt the coldness emanating from him, as if he wasn't a real person, but a ghost existing in this space. I stood there, unable to move, unable to utter a word. Those moments dragged on endlessly, and I felt like I was being sucked into his lifeless gaze. After a long while, he turned around and walked away, not looking back. My eyes still couldn't leave where he had just stood. I feel like I've been in a battle between reality and illusion, and I'm not sure I won. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that man in the gray suit. The feeling of being watched never goes away. Every time I looked into the dark corner of the office or glanced through the deserted hallways, I felt he was still there, waiting for me, watching me from afar. I can't continue living like this. I need to clarify this, find out the truth about that man, about the shadow that I cannot escape. Regardless, I can't let fear take hold of me forever. That shadow must be faced, even though I don't know what to do after facing it. As the office gradually sank into darkness, the building looked dim and lonely, with only a few flickering fluorescent lights remaining, creating an oppressive atmosphere. I sat down to work, trying to focus on the remaining tasks, but the feeling of stress began to rise. Everything around me seemed to become dim, as if the air had become heavier, not only because of the dim lights but also because something invisible was covering everything. This time, I couldn't do anything but feel his presence, the man in the gray suit. Even though I don't see him anymore, I know he's still somewhere in this space, lurking in the dark, almost invisible but always there, watching me. Even though there was no sound and no specific shape, I felt that shadow was waiting, silently existing in the dark corners that I couldn't leave. My hand trembled as I held the pen, trying to write down the words, but my mind was no longer focused on my work. I heard my own heavy breathing, and my heart beat so hard that I could almost hear it beating with each breath. A feeling of fear spread through me, causing me to stop and look around. There was just a glimpse of the wall behind me, but it seemed nothing special. However, the fear did not leave me, and the feeling of being watched became more and more distinct. Suddenly, I heard a creaking sound from behind, as if someone was moving gently in the hallway. My eyes averted, and I tried to keep calm, but a cold wave ran down my spine. All my senses were alert, and I knew that something was waiting in the darkness. I stared into the darkness, a feeling of fear surrounding me, as if I couldn't escape. My legs felt heavy as I stood up and walked towards the door. I felt someone following me. Their footsteps were light, but that presence could not be hidden. With every step I take, I feel like I'm getting closer to something inexplicable. I carefully looked out the window, but there was nothing but the darkness of the empty building. There's no one, no noise, but I know I'm not alone. The tension rose, and I couldn't breathe anymore. The air in the room seemed to become thicker, as if blocked, making me uncomfortable. I stopped in front of the door, my heart pounding. I don't want to go back, but I can't leave either. Every minute passed like mental torture, as I didn't know whether I was facing reality or a never-ending nightmare. My lips were dry as I stood there, waiting, feeling the silence surrounding me. Is he still there? Am I just hallucinating, or is there really something I don't fully understand? Whatever the answer, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of a presence that hung over me, quietly and waiting, in the darkness of that hallway. That feeling stuck with me, never leaving, like a lingering nightmare. And I wonder if I can continue to live in this house, in this space, where his shadow still lingers, where fear never completely disappears. I couldn't shake that strange feeling, as if an invisible force was always pushing me closer to the hallway. Every time I looked at it, I couldn't shake the surging fear, feeling like there was someone always waiting for me at the end of the road. That tension was like an invisible glue that held me together in the late hours of the night, when no one was in the office and the silence of the building was torn apart only by the sound of my heart beating. I can't avoid checking the lobby area every time I need to grab a drink or do something simple. My eyes slid over the partitions, through the dark corners of the building, and I felt a change in the air, as if everything in this space had stopped and listened. Sometimes I think I can hear a soft whisper, something vague, that I can't explain. It was a sound, not clear, but enough to make my heart beat faster. Late one evening, after everyone had gone home, I decided to try again. I turned off all the lights, leaving only the weak light of the desk lamp to illuminate my workspace. My eyes closed for a moment to adjust myself, but when I opened them, I saw a dark figure at the end of the hallway, standing silently, seemingly not moving. At first I thought it was just a reflection, an illusion caused by the dim light. But the feeling of insecurity inside me cannot be dismissed. I stared at that figure, not daring to move. My heart was beating strongly, each beat was like a knock on the surrounding silence. In an instant, that figure moved quickly, as if understanding my fear, then disappeared. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think of anything but leaving the office immediately. In just a few seconds, I stood up, quickly packed my things and went straight out, not daring to look back. My steps were heavy, I felt the coldness in the air, as if something was chasing me, right behind me. All my senses were heightened, as if I were being constantly watched. As I left the building and entered the late-night air, I felt some comfort. However, deep down, I knew that that shadow, the man in the gray suit, still existed somewhere in the building, still waiting for me to return. That feeling cannot be dispelled, no matter where I go. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. His figure, the inexplicable silence, it all seemed to be spinning in my head. Although it might just be my imagination due to stress and fatigue, a part of me cannot deny that that presence is still somewhere in this space, in the darkness of these long corridors and old buildings. The next morning, when I woke up, the feeling of anxiety still stuck with me. I don't know if I can continue to live with this fear, but I also know one thing: I will never be able to forget that shadow, the man in the gray suit, and the feeling he brought. That large steel door looks like a wall between the outside world and the undiscovered. My eyes were glued to the prints on the ground, fresh shoe prints, probably mine, but I couldn't be sure. I felt my body begin to stiffen, each step seemed heavier, as if I was entering a space that did not belong to me. The surrounding darkness seemed to begin to shrink, the space became narrower and quieter. As I approached the steel door, the feeling of being watched came back, stronger than ever. The coldness in the air made my skin rise in waves, and my heart beat so hard that I thought it might burst from my chest. Every breath I take resonates in the terrible silence of this factory. I stood there for a moment, not daring to touch the door, as if I did, something would come out and fall on me. Finally, with a deep breath, I mustered up my courage and grabbed the steel door handle. The cold feeling as I clutched it made me shiver. With a strong push, I pulled the door open. The weak light from the ceiling lights shone inside, drawing eerie shadows on the concrete floor, long shadows as if they were moving, even though there was no one around. In that empty space, I could hear my own breathing, so loud in the silence. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of the presence of someone or something I couldn't see but always felt was present. Large machines, long abandoned, stood there like sleepless monsters, silently waiting. A soft sound, like a low hiss, rang out from somewhere in the darkness. I turned around, eyes wide, looking into what I thought was a thoroughly inspected space, but there was nothing. Silence reigned again, but it was not a safe silence. This is a heavy, unacceptable silence. A silence signals that something is lurking, waiting, just a moment of vulnerability will appear. Big black shadows, like towering machines, never took their eyes off me. I feel them moving, watching me. A small step, a soft sound echoed in the space, as if someone was getting closer. I didn't dare turn back, didn't dare breathe loudly, because I knew that if I did, I wouldn't have a chance to run anymore. When I turned around, everything suddenly changed. The steel door slammed shut behind me, as if some force had just decided not to let me leave. I quickly turned around and ran the same way. My body felt heavy, my legs felt like lead. I didn't dare turn around, didn't dare look to see if anyone was chasing me. I just knew that I had to get out of this place, immediately. My breathing was panting, my heart was pounding, each step seemed to take longer. The building's entrance gradually appeared before my eyes, but the feeling that someone was standing right behind me became more and more clear. That presence, the man in the gray suit, I felt like he was standing in the dark, just a step away from me, but I didn't dare turn back. When I stepped outside, the cold night breeze crept through each layer of clothing, but could not dispel the surrounding feeling of fear. I couldn't shake the impression that he was still there, in that building, silently watching my every step. It feels like I've never really left that place, where the darkness and fear still refused to let go. My heart was pounding, pounding as if it wanted to break my chest. Cold sweat ran down the back of my neck, my hands trembled uncontrollably. I felt a heavy pressure on my chest, as if the air around me had turned to lead, suffocating me. Even though I tried to calm myself down, panic still rose, overwhelming all reason. I knew I had left that apartment, but the fear still followed, like a shadow that could not be dispelled. The knocking sounded again, this time not from the door near me but from farther away in the dim room. A small sound, but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it. Every cell in my body seemed to scream at me not to turn back. But some force made me slowly turn my head, my eyes looking over my shoulder, searching for anything that could explain the sound. Nothing. The room was still silent, empty, with only shadows hidden under the dim rays of fluorescent lights. But I felt it, that presence. Gray, heavy, somewhere, lurking in the shadows, watching me. My breathing became more and more rapid as I continued working, not daring to look out the window or check the shadows. Every time I click my pen on my notebook, every time I take a note, I can feel that presence. Approaching, slowly, but surely. I could feel its eyes touching my back. "Don't turn back," I whispered to myself, but my body didn't listen. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to focus on my work, not wanting to let fear control me. But as soon as I opened my eyes, everything around me suddenly became blurry, as if there was a layer of fog hanging around the air. The knocking sounded again, this time it was a stronger sound, no longer as gentle as before. I felt like something was banging on the nearby door, threatening to disrupt the room's complete silence. My eyes turned, unable to stop, staring at the door. This time, I couldn't bear it anymore. I left everything on the table, stood up, walked out of the room, not daring to look back, because I knew that if I looked back, something would chase me. I walked into the hallway, feeling the air become colder than ever. The fluorescent lights flickered as if they were about to go out, and I couldn't help but feel that someone was behind me. The feeling was so strong that I couldn't bear it anymore. Despite the fear that filled me, I turned around, trying to face what I couldn't see. And as soon as I turned around, the door to my room suddenly closed forcefully, emitting a terrible noise that startled me. I stood frozen, a shiver running down my spine. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. I could feel the cold breath of that shadow, as if it was standing right behind me, staring at me. Feelings of insecurity began to seep into my mind every time I heard strange sounds from inside our small apartment. At first, I thought it was just the sound of household objects moving gently when the wind blew through the window or the typical sounds of this old building. But gradually, I couldn't ignore that feeling. There was someone close, around me, but I couldn't see them. This happened so often that I began to wonder if I was living in a space that had been taken over by something. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, focusing on my laptop screen, I heard a strange noise from the kitchen. It was a soft noise, as if someone was moving something or opening a door. My heart was pounding, and even though I was sure Dan had left for work early, I couldn't deny the feeling was real. There was someone here. I listened some more, but heard nothing more. Everything returned to silence. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't deny that I was haunted by what happened at that factory, the strange noises, the sudden disappearance of shoe prints, and the cold feeling that I couldn't explain. I looked around the house, feeling heavy. The walls, the dark corners of the room, all became blurry and scary. I couldn't help but feel that presence, lurking somewhere in our space. Later that night, when I tried to reassure myself that this was just anxiety caused by work stress, I walked into the kitchen to make dinner. As I stood by the sink, I once again heard light footsteps, a strange sound from behind me. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. I shook my head, trying to dispel that unpleasant feeling, but I couldn't. Once again, I began to doubt what I was feeling. The next morning, when Dan came home from his shift, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Why do I feel someone's presence, even though there's clearly no one? I feel like I'm gradually losing control, being pulled and followed by this darkness. I decided not to tell Dan about this strange feeling, not because I didn't want to share, but because I was afraid he would think I was paranoid. But more and more, I realized that this feeling is more than just a nightmare. It is following me, covering every space I live in. That night, I couldn't sleep. This time, I decided to face strange noises, face fears that I couldn't explain. I stood up, took a flashlight, and decided to check every corner of the house. The room grew darker, and I walked through the apartment's long hallways, feeling the space tighten around me. Each step echoed clearly, like someone's footsteps were following closely behind. My flashlight shined on the wall, and I saw a blurry figure, just for a brief moment, but enough for me to clearly see the outline of a person standing there, right behind. Everything inside me froze, and I couldn't move. I could only stand there, staring at the inexplicable shadow. But when I turned around to face that figure, there was no one there. Empty space. A feeling of coldness prevails. I don't dare take another step. My heart was beating violently, and I felt like the air around me had become so thick it was almost impossible to breathe. Everything became so still, and I couldn't help but think that presence was still there, in the darkness, watching me, waiting to reveal itself. My anxiety increased as I continued driving, unable to take my eyes off the empty road ahead. Everything around me seemed hazy, the trees on the street seemed to be changing shape, the street lights seemed to flicker in the darkness, creating an inexplicable feeling. The faint smell of something burning permeated the air, making me feel suffocated. I checked the vents in the car, but couldn't find the source of the smell. Everything seemed to be going astray, as if an invisible force was interfering with my normal existence. I continued driving, determined not to let the feeling of fear take over. But then, like a blow to the heart, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that image again. A shadowy figure, unclear, but enough to make my heart beat wildly. I looked in the rearview mirror, but when I turned around, there was nothing left. That silence is the most uncomfortable thing. The feeling of being watched, monitored by an invisible but definitely present force is even more clear. I can't explain this feeling. Am I being paranoid? Or is there something that really exists in my space, in my house, and now in this car? The more I think, the more tired and heavy I feel. I used to try to explain everything, telling myself that this was just stress, the imagination of an overworked person, self-generated feelings when faced with a stressful environment. But now, every little noise, every breeze, startles me. I don't know what I'm facing anymore. I decided I wouldn't stop. I don't dare. If I stop, if I look back too long into the shadows, maybe I won't be able to turn back. It feels like someone is waiting for me. Even if it's just a blur, it's enough to make me feel like I can't escape. The road ahead seems endless, and no matter how far I drive, I still feel that presence. Even though I couldn't see it, I still knew it was there, looking at me from behind. In my mind, the question kept echoing, can I escape these things? With each gentle noise in the air, my anxiety increased. Even though I drove through the deserted streets, my mind couldn't take my mind off the shadows in the apartment, the hurried steps in the hallway, and that strange figure that always lingered just out of sight. Every time I think I've escaped, another feeling invades, something is waiting for me, following me no matter where I go. When I left that apartment, I thought everything was over, that I had denied the invisible fears that had taken over my mind. But as the last faint light of morning streamed through the glass, I knew one thing clearly: I would never be able to forget what I had experienced within those walls, and the strange presence in the darkness would forever pursue me. I can't explain it, can't find its origin. Even though I told myself that it was just my imagination, just long-term accumulated tension, a part of me still couldn't shake the feeling that something existed in those quiet spaces. Even though I moved away and started a new life, I can still feel it, can still hear it scratching in the darkness of every night, reminding me that there is something inexplicable, a presence that never leaves. And every time I ask myself, is it really gone, or is it just waiting for the opportunity to return? The answer, I think, is never really there.